Yes.
9 o'clock, and I call this meeting to order. To begin with, Mr. Casey Griffin, will you please call the roll to establish quorum?
Mr. Collins.
Yes.
Ms. Knox. Ms. Hargrove.
Aye.
Mr. Holt.
Here.
Mr. Gentile.
Aye.
Mr. Jensen.
Here.
Ms. McIntyre.
Here.
Mr. Mullenhour.
Here.
Mr. Morrow.
Here.
Mr. Wells.
Here.
Chairman Eby.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have 10 members present, 9 voting.
I declare a quorum is present and we're duly convened. Without objection, Ms. Laurel Cox is excused. At this time, we would like to express our deepest appreciation and gratitude to President McCary and his chief of staff, or should I say chief of staff, Cheryl Clark. What an outstanding job that Austin Peay has done for the state board, hosting us at this meeting. It's interesting too, the partnership that you have with the Montgomery County schools, school system. We clearly saw that. And we recognize the state board that education isn't just K through 12. I think it's K through in the beginning of the industry. We try to visit every year at least one community college or state university. And thank Austin Peay for hosting us. Outstanding. I'd like to give you the floor here if you'd like to say a few words.
Thank you so much, Chairman Eby and board members. It was truly our pleasure to host you on Austin Peay. We were especially excited to have the opportunity to share with you information about some of our unique partnerships with Austin Peay and the area school systems. We were glad you were able to observe some of our teacher residents in action when you visited classrooms in the Clarksville Montgomery County schools. As you heard, the Grow Your Own Teacher Residency Program developed by our Erickson College of Education is the first program in the nation to be approved by the U.S. Department of Labor as a registered teacher apprenticeship. That kind of gives me cold chills. You also heard about our exciting new partners engaged with emerging researchers or the Peer program, where high school students from the middle college at Austin Peay, which is a Clarksville Montgomery County school system school, work on research along with professors from our College of Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics. Another unique and highly impactful, I would say life-changing in some cases, collaboration between our university and Montgomery County schools. We appreciate so much the work that you do in the K through 12 space, and thank you for acknowledging those collaborations, and we would invite you back anytime as a group or individually. We are very happy to have had you on our campus for your meeting.
Thank you. This time I'd like to recognize Nate Morrow, congressional representative from this district, and let him say a few.
Yeah, I just want to kind of reiterate what both have said. It has been a pleasure to be in District 7, specifically the Clarksville Montgomery County schools. I know I was at Burns Elementary yesterday with the team, and we were at multiple schools, but truly watching how a university and a school system can, I think, like genuinely innovate best practice for how to take both kids graduating high school and adults coming out of second careers and put them on a pathway of success to reinvest back in the community of their school system is unbelievable. And I would just recommend that everybody watching all of our districts across the state really pay attention to what they're doing here. I think there's something very, very special that is meeting a very direct need, which is not enough high quality teachers wanting to be in the profession. We have them in a profession, but we need more of them wanting to get in the profession, and they're doing a great job of helping it be affordable. Austin Peay is doing a great job working with the district on how to be affordable, how to be accessible, and how to give great feedback. So there's real on-the-job training. So I just was astounded by it, and I'm so thankful we all were able to do that at our different schools. And I'm excited to see, 10 years from now, what that looks like in the Clarksville Montgomery school system.
Very well said. I think I just promoted you to congressional representative. It's congressional representative for state board.
It's true. It's easy to say.
Are there other comments and from other board members that they would like to make at this point in time? Dr. Morrison?
Let me give the recap from yesterday. You ready for that?
Sure.
Well, at the risk of sounding like a broken record, it really was such a pleasure to start our day in the schools in Clarksville, Montgomery. And thank you to Dr. Jean Ludovader, the superintendent, who was so willing to host us, and the Austin Peay partnership. I think there is so much to learn from that model for candidates on any pathway. It was really cool to see how supported and how integrated those teacher residents were from the first year of their sort of formal schooling in the school system as classroom teachers, working alongside the classroom teacher of record. So it was quite an experience in the morning. Also at the lunch that we had with the middle college program here in Austin Peay, and learning how those high school juniors and seniors are doing real research on the campus of Austin Peay, getting work-based learning experiences, graduating with an associate's degree, often along with their high school diploma. Again, just really inspiring and motivating for us as board members and staff to think about what's possible in our state for our students. And then those of you watching know we had a very full afternoon. Lots of presentations from the Department of Education. Started with innovative school models, which was also really great to get an update on what's happening with some of those grant dollars across the state and middle and high schools, and what innovations are taking shape, and just beginning a conversation about what that means for policy implications and how we can help to clear the way for some of those innovative models that seem to be serving students well. We had a lengthy discussion about school letter grades and the A through F model that the department has just rolled out. A lot of good conversation there. Then we jumped right into early literacy initiatives, another really important set of work, including the 4th grade adequate growth definition that's on the agenda for our board today. We looked at 2023 TCAP results, talked about social studies that is coming on first reading, social studies standards and those revisions, and then talked briefly about some licensure discipline cases that are up before our board today. So it was a full afternoon. I know today will be equally full, and look forward to the conversation.
Any other comments or questions before we get into our formal agenda? If not, we'll start a formal agenda. I remind all the presenters to identify themselves and their titles, and also try to avoid using jargon and acronyms, and if you please behind the acronyms. With that, we'll go to our first item, which is our consent items. If the board knows, do I have a motion to accept the consent item? Vice Chair Cobbins moves. Do I have a second? Second. Mr. Wells seconds. Any discussion? All in favor then for accepting the consent items as presented, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. First item on our report items are State Board of Education member updates. And I would ask any board members would like to talk about what they've been doing over the past, we've had a meeting, and some of the engagements that we've included.
I had the opportunity to attend with Mr. Durline and Mr. James last week, the National Association of State Boards of Education conference in San Diego, which was really a great opportunity to engage with other state board members from across the country and get some understanding of sort of common issues that we're all dealing with, and simultaneously learn from them about some successes and opportunities that we might be able to employ here in Tennessee. Great workshops. AI was a hot topic, as you know, and computer science and other topics were covered. And we actually have some thoughts and ideas, particularly Mr. Durline and I, about some things that we might be able to employ here in Tennessee. So we'll be working on those and seeing what we can make happen. So it was a great conference.
For those people, NASB is working with us on the licensure step back. Important function. Other comments? Yes, Mr. Ditson.
We were in Jackson at the Western District, western part of Tennessee TSBA meeting. And that was very interesting, and got to meet some of the leadership there and spend a few minutes here and their updates.
You can tell by looking at me, right?
Okay,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also attended the TSB, the Upper Cumberland area, and Maura was with me and a couple of our staff members. And again, similarly, they heard some great updates, then had an opportunity to do a little bit of networking with districts that were represented there. Also, there were several of us that attended SCORE Future Ready Summit on September the 6th. And that was really a culmination of work that was being done in advance, where we had different members of the state board who were serving on panels, and I served on one of them, and talking about the workforce preparedness of our students for the future and ongoing efforts between now and whenever they're on the trajectory to graduate, et cetera. There's one other, I always attend, and I think most of you all do, monthly Director Study Councils, and I attended the one for the Upper Cumberland last month. And it's always great to be among them, you know, hear the kinds of things that they're dealing with on a daily basis. And in particular, I usually ask, what are the pain points for anything that you know are coming down the pipe from the State Board of Education, so I can keep my ear to the ground, and they know that I take that information and weigh it against what are we going to do ultimately for what's in the best interest for students, and they understand that completely. So those are my inputs.
Very good. Any others? Ms. McAdoo.
So I also attended a TSBA meeting, my very first one. So that was very interesting. I'm just learning so many things in the past few months about how things are ran behind the scenes. And I attended the Superintendent Study Council a couple weeks ago. Once again, interesting. I got to meet some amazing people, and they just have a heart for students. So that's amazing. And I also met with Mackenzie Mosby at the Education Trust, and that she has reached out to, I think, several of us, and she's wanting to know how they can be beneficial to our area and also to us. So.
Excellent. Good. Any others?
Sure. So,
Yes.
I was invited to the South Central Superintendent's a few weeks ago, to talk about A through F, as you all discussed. We discussed a lot yesterday, and Ms. Cox joined on that one, so we were both able. And she got to go to her first one. You know, it went really well. I think we walked into a meeting with you know, a lot of concern. Also a meeting where they expected us to be voting on the A through F. And so we kind of talked through that. I think from, you know, what I heard yesterday, that a lot of their concerns were met. You know, some weren't, some were not. But I think we're going to have some interesting conversations, you know, as we go through this.
I think that's a very good point, Mr. Wells, is that I think people need to realize that the state board does not vote on A through F. That is a department decision. You know, we appreciate the opportunity to provide input. I know I've gotten several letters, emails a few days telling me how they would like for me to vote, et cetera. But I want people to know that we don't vote on that, but the discussion is good. Any other questions or comments?
Well, I also attended the fall TSBA meeting at Millington High School month before last month, hosted by Superintendent Bo Griffin, and it was a great gathering of districts from around the area. We had great dialogue.
Yeah, those are always excellent opportunities. I attended the East Core Superintendent Study Council meeting. I was also at the Tennessee Business Roundtable meeting down in Chattanooga, where we're talking to education workforce. We have some upcoming meetings, the Niswonger Foundation meeting, and then I'm presenting at Cumberland University. They're having the first inaugural forum on education week after next. So great opportunities for the board members to engage. Continue to encourage you to do that. That's how we learn and hear and listen. Thank each one of you for doing this. Next item on the list is our master plan report. Hopefully all the board members have seen the master plan and had a chance to review that. Without objection, I'm going to proceed in the discussion of the master plan as if it's a board workshop. Is there any objection to that? As you know, development of the master plan is required in law. The law charges the board with developing and maintaining a master plan for public education, kindergarten through grade 12, and providing recommendations to the executive branch, the General Assembly, and the local board of education, the director of school, regarding the use of public funds for education. I encourage everyone, our master plan is on our website, and I encourage the public to get a copy of it. It sets focus areas, action steps, and goals that are within our local control as rule and policy-making bodies. We know that our work requires the efforts of everyone, and so again, that's why we interface with organizations like the Department of Education. Department of Education has their strategic plan. We have our master plan. I think those two are aligned well. We want to continue with alignment. Sure, we don't know if you're going to develop your own new strategic plan or not, but if you do, what we would like to do is collaborate together so that we develop those in alignment. The report that we're going to be discussing today is the first annual report that shares the board actions of the board and their outcomes of our goals. And we'll continue to publish and discuss these on an annual basis and then inform our recommendations, public funds, education every third year. Again, the document, report documents our 4 strategic areas. That's literacy, post-secondary career, teachers and leaders, and engagement and accountability. So with that, I will step through. We have Allie, the master plan that we can pull up so people can see. Is that possible? Okay. All right, we'll just talk through it then. I think we have copies of the master plan.
It's in SharePoint.
The agenda.
It's in SharePoint.
Pull up, so. All right, let's go through each one of these and ask the board members if they have any comments with regard to literacy highlights. Again, our focus is on all 3rd grade, 8th grade students and 3rd grade subgroups reading at grade level. And then if we go through, we can see how we did against that. I think what's important is that we did see an increase in the percentage of all 3rd grade students increased 4.8 points. I think that's a pretty substantial increase that met our goal. Economically disadvantaged increased by 2.8 points. That was not as high as we wanted to, but we did increase in each one of the areas. The percentage of English learner students increased by 9.3 points. I think that's pretty substantial. Any comments about the literacy goals? Secondary and career highlights. We don't have the results yet for the ready graduate data. That would be 2022. That will be coming out soon. And then our second focus focuses on percentage of students enrolling in post-secondary. We saw an increase here. See that went up from 52.8% to 54.3%. We're not back up to pre-pandemic levels, but we did see an increase in that. Next, teachers and leader highlights. Down to the results. And that we see that, 2 of the 3 annual goals are measured in educator preparation report cards, and we saw an increase in teacher retention rates, slight increase in the percentage of recently licensed teachers with racially or ethnically diverse backgrounds. But we did see a slight decline in the percentage of educators teaching on a permit, moving to full and valid license. As we mentioned before, our team is working to streamline the licensure process, doing the step back, and hopefully that we will see an increase in those in the future as a result of that.
Chairman,
Yes.
can I go back to post-secondary just for a moment?
Absolutely.
Ask a question. We've got a demographic shift that's coming at us in terms of numbers of kids that are going to be going to college out of the years gone by. That so there's a downward trend right now for college and post-secondary students. And I don't need an answer to this, just bring it up. If we've got this goal, how are we going to measure that in numbers or percentages, or how do we next year when we're going into a period of time where the number of students who are actually going to post-secondary because of general demographics, how do we reflect that? And then secondly, the other question that I had is around, we've talked some about adult learners and where that's not necessarily going to be under the Department of Education, but it's an interest that I think we all have in addressing that. And it, I'm not asking for it necessarily to be reflected here, but there are some things there that we ought to have on the agenda.
Mr. Jensen, when we work together with the Department of Education, we look rather than at an in count of students that are graduating and go to college, we do it as a college going rate. That way, when you have a population decline or an increase in population, that happens in Fort Campbell or here when you have Fort Campbell in or out of deployment. But so we do it as a rate. That way, that in count changing. We also know that that cliff is going to be different from county to county. Some places will be more impacted than others. So we keep it as a rate. That way, we don't see fluctuations just based on that.
We still want to come back next year and we're,
Right, it's not reflective of.
That's not reflective. World out there that we're looking at demographically.
I think it's continues to be important that we track this information. I mean, it's very valuable again as we move K through 12 into higher ed, and then eventually somehow it'd be nice if we can track how well they succeed after. Yeah, that's just what was about.
So after they graduate, the post-secondary is a little bit harder, but we definitely can look at least in a cohort, how they progress. Are they retained in college, and how they progress through our institutions, or at least our public ones?
Well, and we measure through our EPP report card how our teachers, for the first 3 years, once they get in the industry. So can we not use that as a model for other graduates, how they succeed? I mean, it's a big database, but we're talking about a longitudinal database, P through 20, it's there. And that's what we really want to do is pre-K through 20 into industry. And if we can measure that, I think we can see the success of what we're doing in an education system.
Absolutely. We certainly can get to that. What I'll say about the P20 system is that it's not an in-field placement like it is for the teacher prep report card. So we know their employer, but not necessarily what they're doing there. They could be employed by Vanderbilt Hospital, and we don't know if they're doing computer IT work, or if they're a nurse, or if they're a surgeon. What we know is their employer. So teasing things out can be a little more difficult than you have the educator's license number.
Right.
But it's certainly something we can work on because we're interested in the impact of what higher ed does for families, for Tennesseans. And we know the impact is great, but it's always helpful for us when people are wondering about the importance of higher ed. So we have the numbers to back that up.
Thank you. Yep. Okay, let's move on down to the stakeholder engagement, the last one. Certainly, we've spent a lot of time engaging with our stakeholders over the last year and held many public meetings like we just recently talked about. And we've received new charges under the law regarding accountability, and will continue to play a role in that from public engagement. But most important thing we can do is get that public engagement as we make our decisions. We appreciate the comments that we received. One other thing that I challenged the board members last year at a retreat, each board member, I wanted to take one item that they would consider one of their primary items when they leave the board. I think each board member ought to feel good about what they've done on the board. And if there's something that they can point to and say, I made that impact when I was with education. So I challenged each board member to come up with criteria. And I would like for each board member basically just to say what their focus area is going to be on top of it. So we'll just go around the room. Mr. Mullenhour, would you like to? Sure.
Yeah, my focus is going to remain the career and technical education, and specifically, and this is actually an agenda item today, specifically looking at monitoring and better understanding the implications of visa funding with respect to CTE. I know that the department's done a lot of work on that we're hearing about later, but I'll be looking at that and evaluating that and helping them that as we go forward.
Excellent. Back it up.
Obviously, I want to be the teacher voice, just being able to be in the classroom and understand how it actually works in the trenches. And also just help with communication. It's kind of hard to get from here to the actual teacher in the classroom and making sure they understand if they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. And just with licensure, making sure they understand those pathways, understand there are endorsements that are free that they can obtain. But it's just hard to make sure that everyone knows what they're, where to get that information from.
I'd like my focus to be early literacy, and in particular the 3rd and 4th grade promotions, rules, and just the implementation of that, where there's been a lot of discussion and a lot for the state board and a lot happening with it. So I'm excited to be part of that.
I personally focused on math, as Ms. Harpel knows, is that I would like to be sure that we have a good understanding of math needs through the K through 12, and one focus area is math, and every year in high school and 4 credits of math, and what we can do there to improve that process. And I won't go any further in that at this point in time. I think Ms. Harpel knows what I'm talking about.
Well, I have 2 areas, one that I chose, and then one my partner from Memphis dragged me into. So, first though is students with disabilities and special needs. It's an area that I'd like to focus on and delve further into. Just understanding that oftentimes most of our conversations center on typical students, and understandably, but just want to make sure that that voice and presence is constant for us as we make decisions. Second, working with Mr. Jensen in terms of adult learners. There's some models in Memphis that are really successful that we would like to see proliferate in Memphis and throughout the state if possible. We're going to work together to see what we can do.
There are 600,000 somewhere adults that are short in our state of a high school degree, and it limits their ability to apply for jobs, and obviously it impacts their family and the children, et cetera. So to really address all that, we're going across several verticals within state government. Commissioner Reynolds, I think, is very much enthusiastic about this, and I think we can make a big difference. It's a little bit sort of outside, but it's not. So the other part that has to do with making sure we've got obviously Blue Oval City in my district, and being able to get the barriers down between the various parts of state government, and it really seems to be working, moving in that direction. to really get the higher education component as well as the K through 12, even back or obviously literacy and early, but that's just a huge opportunity. And I think it has implications across the entire state. And if we can be successful in you probably heard the HTL University, which is taking 3 districts and bringing it together in a coordinated way to address the needs of industry in that part of the state. And I think that's, if we can pull that off and make that happen, I think it does have implications across the whole state. So everybody's working hard on it.
Mr. Chairman, since serving on the board, I've had several focus areas that I do not want to lose sight of. So I definitely have to say career technical education will continue to be a focus and passion of mine. Early literacy, and we launched that subcommittee or study committee or whatever we call it, chaired by Mr. Morrow. And then licensure, which I chaired for a number of years. So those are still with me. But one of the things that I want some work to be done on it, and I will try to do as much research as I can, recognizing that we are often resource challenged and having access to researchers is not always so easy for us. But I'm interested in, really honestly, based on input from various stakeholders, looking at graduation requirements. And I want to be clear, I am not advocating I don't want to say dumbing down, but that's not the right way to look at it. I still want us to have rigor and strong standards and expectations for students when they graduate. They also want us to consider, is there another, instead of the traditional 4-year path, which does require Algebra 1, Algebra 2, geometry, and a 4th, is there a path for other students in math that are not destined to go the 4-year route, that would still ensure that they are graduating very well for their path in life? And it may be eliminating one of those. So I don't know. I don't have the answer. And I've said this to Sarah. I'm not sure that I buy into it, but hearing this from parents, their children who are struggling and they're not destined to go to a 4-year institution, do they really need, as an example, Algebra 2? So I want some research to be done. I'll do as much as I can on my own, but whoever can assist in that regard. I know that there are other states that have multiple paths to graduation, and I'm not talking about for special needs students. I'm talking about, as I've mentioned, I'm going the 4-year route and I'm going the TCAT or the 2-year route. What should my requirements look like? So I want an objective, research-based assessment of should we have that other pathway to graduation.
Thank you. Mr. Morrow.
Yes, sir. So 2, 1 has sort of always been a fascination that was only accelerated by COVID. I think COVID was the disruptor, like Uber was to the taxi cab, right? Like, and so I think the Pepper at the Middle College was a great example. This is started somebody who was 16, just took a different approach. And so I think as we look at, and we were at the SCORE conference, Commissioner Reynolds presented at the SCORE conference, like what our workforce, leader force, labor force needs are of a state, just have to have an alignment within the offerings and the options that we have. And as things are changing, we need to stay ahead of that curve instead of trying to play catch up. I don't know how that happens, but I think let's get ahead of it. We have a lot of bright people who are in the classroom. We have a lot of places where businesses can align with schools, where communities can align with schools. And so when we're looking at programming, offering, what is a requirement, what isn't, what's necessary, what isn't, I think that's a fascinating place I'd love to continue to press into. And then the other is school safety. I just joined the school state safety team, the governor's state safety team, a collaborative effort on how we create best practices for safety in the state of Tennessee for schools. And, I look at it like the fire marshal. I'm an educator, so like the fire marshal is sort of the sovereign when it comes to a school. You can't build, you can't do, this is how you do it, right? You don't have this in the stairwell, you don't, and yet, which is great. And we've not lost a student to a fire since the 50s. And so what type of infrastructures do we need to apply to school safety broader? And what does that look like? And then as a subcategory, there are 600 non-public schools in Tennessee. None of those schools have access to police radios. So we know the tragedy at Covenant, they have to dial 911. They have to go through a dispatcher, wait on a dispatcher to happen. So anything we can do in shaving minutes, I think is important. And that is to me, a non-controversial and somewhat inexpensive option where school security officers being trained in their non-public schools need to have the same aspect to the fastest response as possible. So those are the two things. One has been, one has become a newer, I think, and very high priority of mine, and I look forward to focusing on them.
Excellent. That ties to the innovative school models.
Yeah, right. Look at it differently.
Well, so some of my feedback on the master plan to Ally was, I wish we'd accomplished everything, but I'm glad we set some standards high enough that, you can't accomplish everything or you're not striving enough. And so I had two things on mine. One was low-hanging fruit to check that box, and the other maybe a little bit more difficult. But superintendent in my district brought up an issue of maybe some school safety. A teacher lost their license, then went over to the private school side. The teacher was accused of grooming and found guilty of grooming, but then went to the private school and was hired, and then it happened again. And so just a quick check the box. We'll be working, or soon we'll have a rule before us to require private schools to also check with Compass. Is that the Compass and our records to kind of keep from that. So that's a quick, easy. We check the box and the school safety kind of thing. The other would be, as most of you know, I had several years in the state legislature and then several years on the executive branch side. So I've worked with constituents on things that they've had and helped pass laws. And then I've been on the side of the executive branch and helped DOE implement some of those laws. Also came into state government, started my career at a time where maybe we were not honest with our families about where we were for standards. And so I feel like it's been a priority of mine since I got out of college to focus on accountability and make sure we have the best teachers in our schools and make sure that we're honest with our citizens and we're preparing kids to go into the next chapter. What I've learned from those years is it's hard for us to make laws and policy when we don't know how to implement them. And so I feel like as a parent and someone who works in executive branch and now on here, I'd like to be a part of this A through F, third grade retention, these things that we're focusing on to make sure that our kids are ready to move the next step, but also kind of be that mediator to help us implement it correctly and understand what our superintendents are dealing with when they have to implement these laws and policies that us in the state government are making. And so I have a very specific one that we're checking the box on very soon and one very broad one. So I hope that's okay, Mr. Chairman.
Every one of those are excellent, outstanding ideas and things to work on. And like I say,
Captured it all.
it's written in.
Yeah.
No, to focus on, and for people out in TV land, our board serves on various committees. We have subcommittees of the board that takes time, et cetera. But each one of these things that you've just talked about align with our master plan very well. And if you'll focus on those and outside of the other activities that we do, I say when you leave this board, you can feel good. Hey, I made a real impact on education. That's important to do. So we won't report on this every board meeting, but what I will do is I will ask at each board meeting if somebody would like to report on any progress that they've done towards some of those goals. Thank you. Appreciate it. Any other comments with regard to the master plan and how things get to I want to thank Ally Reed for leading this effort. Again, it's an outstanding document if you haven't had a chance to look at it, and we look forward to using it, guiding us as we go through the process each year. With that being concluded, we'll go back into our regular session unless there's any objection. All right. Now, let's go on. Items, first reading. First item. Non-public school approval process rule. Angie Sanders.
Good morning, Chairman and members. Angie Peters, General Counsel for the board. Presenting on first reading revisions to the non-public schools approval process rule 05200702. State law requires every child residing in Tennessee between the ages of 6 and 17 inclusive to attend a public or non-public school. Non-public schools are defined as including private schools, church-related schools, and independent home schools. This rule establishes the different types of non-public schools in Tennessee, the process for approval of those schools and their accrediting or membership agencies, as well as requirements schools and accrediting agencies must comply with. The rules were significantly updated in 2022 and recently went into effect in August of this year. Revisions are proposed to bring further clarity based on feedback received by both state board and department staff as these new rules have begun implementation. These revisions include the following: clarifying that vaccination requirements do not apply to students who are enrolled in a Category 4 school and educated at home by their parent. These are commonly referred to as umbrella homeschools. This is in accordance with a recent law that passed, Public Chapter 296 of 2023. Adding a 3-year on-ramp for Categories 1, 2, and 5 schools to comply with the requirement to maintain at least 10 full-time school-age students enrolled in their school. So this would begin beginning in the 26-27 school year. We also added language to the section on Category 3 schools to ensure consistent requirements across categories. Requiring all categories of schools to check the Tennessee Educator License Database, otherwise known as TN-Compass, to determine if an applicant for a teaching position or any other position requiring proximity to school children has ever had a Tennessee Educator License suspended or revoked. Currently, this is optional. This goes to what Mr. Wells was just talking about in terms of requiring that those schools are aware of any past history before they make any hiring decisions. Adding language to ensure that high schools are aware of the requirement to teach American history and government if requirements set forth in state law are met. Removing references to homeschools in Categories 1 and 5, that was just using language. And again, the only place that homeschool really exists under the law and the rule is an independent homeschool, and then a parent teacher who has enrolled their child in a Category 4 school, otherwise known as an umbrella school. And then adding additional details regarding the process for a church-related school to apply directly to the State Board of Education for approval. We will have a rulemaking hearing. We've scheduled that for December 21st, and we'll bring any additional revisions to this rule based on that public feedback. We've also already met with the Advisory Council for Non-Public Schools on these rules. We will continue that engagement between first and final reading, and then bring any additional revisions to you all, hopefully in February. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Ms. Sanders? Mr. Mullenhour.
I realize this is first reading and there'll be time for people to ask questions. As a very practical matter for a non-public school that would want to check the TN-Compass database, how is that information being made available to them? Does it require, is there a cost involved, et cetera?
So there's no cost to check the free site. So anyone, including parents, can go on to the TN-Compass public site, type in a teacher's name or license number, and be able to find out. There's a section on there where it says previously suspended or revoked, and it'll say yes or no. So that is completely free. When we first made the revisions to the rule to include this as an option, we made sure that schools knew that was free. We are working with the Department of Education. Our goal would be that we can get every non-public school in Tennessee an account in TN-Compass. As Mr. Morrow mentioned, that's a big undertaking considering there are something non-public schools. But that will also help with the reporting requirements, because there's also a requirement in the law that has been there for many years that directors of non-public schools report misconduct of any licensed teacher to the state board so that we can consider whether or not we need to issue any sort of license discipline. So it sort of serves the dual purpose of making it easier for them to check and see that educators' history if they've been suspended or revoked, but also making it easier for them to report to the state in the event they need to. Also, if you don't know who in your building is licensed, then how do you know who to report? So they really kind of serve a dual purpose, but it is free for them to check that currently.
Great, thank you.
Just for the record, I speak for myself, but as someone who leads a non-public school, the way I look at this is the state owns the license, right? As a private school, you don't have to hire a licensed teacher. You don't have to have licensed people. So you can, I mean, we teach Bible. It's going to be hard to get a state license and teaching Bible, right? That doesn't exist. So you're not bound to hire only licensed people, but those people who are licensed, again, since that is a state license, then we would, I think, be required to fulfill the obligations to the license holder, which is the state board. And so Angie's done a great job of sort of opening up the eyes of the non-public schools. I'm like, hey, you know, there are some regulations that everybody needs to follow. And while we love our autonomy, we love the nature of that autonomy. There, again, the license is owned by the state. The license is given by the state. The license is, you know, held accountable by the state. And so for us, having this access is actually a great resource, and there's not a cost prohibitive, you know, it's not cost prohibitive. So I mean, it's kind of a no-brainer. And that's speaking, again, just for me, not anybody else, but, and I look at the role I'm in, it seems pretty smart.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to remark on this. This change that's being brought forward with respect, especially to the vaccination side of it, represents an example where the way that the law was put together, it would be possible to interpret it the way that the representative who brought it forward looked at it and thought he was passing it, and it's also possible to look at it in other ways. But our general counsel, the general counsel for the Department of Education, folks came together and made this work according to what was written in the law, so that nothing that we have done or this interpretation of it goes against that, but it had the effect of restoring some confidence of a whole lot of people who were watching that, including several members of the legislature. And it's an example of that partnership.
Any other questions or comments? If none, is there a motion to accept on first reading non-public schools approval process rule? Second. All in our moves, Vincent seconds. Any further discussions? No discussions. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Winston. Thanks, Ms. Robin Ye, Alternative Education.
Good morning, board members. Robin Ye, Deputy Director of Policy at the Department of Education. I'm here to present on first reading a repeal of the Alternative Education Programs Policy 2.302. The State Board of Education's Alternative Education Programs Policy further details the Alternative Education Rule. This item repeals the policy because the requirements contained in the policy are duplicative of the requirements outlined in the Alternative Education Rule. Language that was previously contained in this policy is being incorporated into the rule that is on final reading at this meeting. And with that, the department recommends acceptance of this item on first reading, and State Board staff concurs.
Okay, any questions with regard to repealing this policy? If none, is there a motion to accept the recommendation? Comments, news, Chair Hargrove, second. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion carries. Next item. Ms. Taylor Reed, Educator License Policy.
Hello, Taylor Reed, Senior Director of Licensure. Tennessee State Board of Education Educator Licensure Policy 5.205 further defines Educator Licensure Rule 0520-02-03 and outlines general licensure requirements, including application and duration of licenses, professional development plans, and endorsements. This item makes revisions to the licensure renewal and advancement section by removing the section in its entirety, as requirements for renewal and advancement are detailed in Educator Licensure Rule, Chapter 0520-02-03. This item also makes revisions to the endorsement sections by allowing an educator with a practitioner or professional level license to add an endorsement by holding a major in an area aligned to a qualifying middle or secondary core academic or world languages endorsement. This item also clarifies that candidates holding a practitioner level license enrolled in a job embedded program shall complete all program requirements prior to adding additional endorsements to the practitioner license. And lastly, this item creates endorsement areas split by K-8 and K-12 grade bands for English as a second language, health and wellness education, and physical education with an effective year of 2024. Currently, only K-12, K/12 endorsements exist for these areas, and the creation of these endorsements split by grade band will allow the department to better issue equivalent endorsements to out-of-state candidates that are appropriately aligned to the grade level of students served. The department plans to bring a recommendation in the future to requirements for state board approved educator preparation programs to create pathways for these endorsements as well. The Department of Education recommends acceptance of this item on first reading. The SBE staff concurs with the recommendations, and with that, happy to take questions.
Thank you, Ms. Reed. Any questions for Ms. Reed? Any questions, comment? I continue to see the improvements, things like this being implemented, very valuable.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
The only question I have is, when do you expect the recommendations for the EPPs to come before the board? I know you said that's going to be a recommendation in the future. Do you have any idea when?
We are looking and consulting with our EPP stakeholders currently. We actually believe if it should be accepted that there's going to be a very easy on-ramp, if you will. It would not require any changes in specialty area program approval. In fact, we are hoping that this will be modeled similarly to the special education interventionist endorsement, where it's the same content assessment. It would just be a difference in pedagogy depending on what that educator was first prepared with. So we believe that this will be a fast round of feedback, if you will, but we want to ensure we include everyone in the
It's
conversation.
too early to predict when it might come before us, correct? Yeah. Right. Thank you.
Any other questions? No questions. We have a recommendation for on first reading educator licensure or just for educator licensure policy 5.502. Is there a motion to accept?
So moved.
Chair Hargrove, do we have a second? Chair Cobbins, seconds. Any further discussions? If none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, Ms. Reed.
Again, Taylor Reed, Senior Director of Licensure. Tennessee State Board of Education Educator Licensure Rule 0520-02-03 outlines the license types issued in Tennessee and pathways towards licensure. Sections -.03 through -.07 govern the issuance of teacher, occupational, school service personnel, JORTC, and post-secondary educator licenses. Section -.10 governs the issuance of instructional leader licenses. This item makes revisions to the requirements for all educator license types to ensure alignment across license types and ensures requirements for license issuance, renewal, advancement, and reactivation are clearly defined. Additionally, this item makes revisions to the requirements for instructional leader licenses to ensure alignment for license renewal and advancement in accordance with TCA Chapter 49-5-50703. This item proposes the following revisions for requirements for teacher licenses in Rule 0520-02-03-.03. Clarifies that an educator who has completed an approved preparation program in a state other than Tennessee may be issued a practitioner or professional teacher academic license if they currently hold a valid Tennessee practitioner or professional occupational license. Amends the ability for occupational license holders to be issued a teacher license to include middle and secondary endorsements in the core academic, world languages, and CTE academic categories to align with the teacher license to occupational license pathway. Clarifies that an educator who holds a professional level occupational license in Tennessee can advance a practitioner teacher license, which aligns with the occupational advancement options. It clarifies that an educator holding a practitioner teacher license following the issue of a limited license does not need to complete an educator preparation program in order to renew the first issuance of the practitioner teacher license. This item proposes the following revisions to requirements for occupational teacher licenses in Rule 0520-02-03-0.04. Clarifies that an educator who has completed an approved preparation program in a state other than Tennessee may qualify for a teacher license, academic, if they currently hold a valid Tennessee practitioner or professional academic license. Amends the ability to be issued an occupational license by holding a valid teacher license and submitting evidence demonstrating relevant years of experience for occupational endorsements that do not require an industry certification. Removes unnecessary assessment requirements for issuance, renewal, and advancement of occupational licenses to align with licensure policy changes effective as of June 1st, 2023, and the professional assessments for Tennessee Educators Policy 5.105. Allows an educator holding a practitioner occupational license to complete, upon completion of an approved EPP, to add additional occupational endorsement. This revision aligns with the ability for individuals with practitioner teacher academic licenses to add endorsements. Removes the ability for an educator issued an occupational license under Pathway 3 to advance to a professional license without completion of an occupational educator preparation program to ensure consistency with the options available to an educator who is issued a practitioner license under the limited license rule 0520-02-03-0.13. This item proposes the following revisions to requirements for school service personnel in Rule 0520-02-03-0.05. Removes the requirement for all coursework to be completed prior to licensure with licensure recommendations for candidates enrolled in a school counselor preparation program with job embedded practice who hold at a minimum a bachelor's degree under Pathway 2. Removes the redundant Pathway 4 from licensure options, as Pathway 2 would apply to all candidates recommended for school counselor licensure enrolled in a program with job embedded practice. Removes unnecessary assessment requirements for issuance of an endorsement in school social work to align with the professional assessments for Tennessee Educators Policy 5.105. And amends advancement requirements for school service personnel licensure to include educator preparation program or EPP completion and applicable assessments to align with advancement requirements for other educator licenses. This item proposes the following revisions to requirements for a JORTC license in Rule 0520-02-03-0.06. Amends renewal requirements for JORTC licenses by replacing a valid JORTC license with a valid JORTC training certificate. Adds reactivation requirements for JORTC licenses to include an active JORTC training certificate and verification that the applicant will be employed in a JORTC program in a Tennessee LEA. And then this item proposes the following revisions to requirements for post-secondary educators in Rule 0520-02-03-0.07. Amends assessment requirements to align with other educator types by replacing the 5-year age limit with current assessments. Clarifies that a practitioner post-secondary educator or PSE license is continuously renewable if advancement requirements are not met. And clarifies that if renewal requirements are not met within the validity period, then the license shall expire. This item proposes the following revisions to Rule 0520-02-03-0.10 for instructional leader licenses. Amends licensure advancement guidelines to include being current in all tassel hours. Clarifies that out-of-state experience used for the purpose of obtaining the instructional leader license professional or ILLP must have accrued out of state. And this item proposes revisions to Rule 0520-02-03-0.13 for the limited license to clarify the advancement requirements for educators seeking to advance from a limited license to a practitioner license. Lastly, this item codifies the grace period to renew or advance the applicable license types found in Educator Licensure Rule 0520-02-03-0.03 to 0520-02-03-0.10 until October 1 following the date of expiration if requirements are met within the validity period. State board staff will hold a rulemaking hearing between first and final reading to collect public feedback. The Department of Education recommends acceptance of this item on first reading. The SBE staff concurs with this recommendation. And with that, happy to take questions.
Thank you, Ms. Reed. Any questions for Ms. Reed? No questions. Is there a motion to accept? Educator licensure rule 0520020303 and 071013 as recommended.
So move.
Vice Chair Cobbins moves. Is there a second?
Second.
Hold seconds. Further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item is Reed.
Taylor Reed, Senior Director of Licensure. Tennessee Board of Education Professional Assessments for Tennessee Educators Policy 5.105 outlines general assessment requirements as well as pedagogical, specialty area content, and foundational literacy skills assessments. This item proposes the following revision to Section 1, General Assessment Requirements. Clarifies that assessment timelines and expectations for licensure reactivation are detailed in Department of Education guidance. This item proposes the following section revisions to Section 3, Specialty Area Content Assessment. Clarifies that an educator who holds a major aligned to a qualifying endorsement can both renew and advance a license without the associated specialty area content assessment. Identifies the following specialty area content assessments as needed upon licensure renewal for job embedded candidates, teaching reading elementary 5205, and education of young children 5024. Amends the special education preschool / early childhood test code 5691 assessment code for the integrated early childhood pre-K /3 endorsement. This assessment is being retired by ETS, and the new assessment, special education early childhood / early intervention test code 5692, will be accepted in its place. Revisions to replace this assessment code were approved by the State Board in June 2023 for other applicable endorsement areas, but the change was inadvertently left off of the integrated early childhood pre-K to 3 endorsement. And removes the teaching reading elementary education 5203 as it is no longer accepted as of August 31st, 2023. Lastly, this item removes the requirement for teaching reading elementary 5205 for middle grades 6 through 8 endorsements, as the grades covered by the endorsements do not align to the assessment. The Department of Education recommends acceptance of this item on first reading. The State Board staff concurs with this recommendation. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Ms. Reed. Any questions for Ms. Reed? If no questions, is there a motion to accept professional assessments for Tennessee Education Policy 5.105? Chair Cobbins moves. Is there a second? 12 seconds. Further discussion? No discussion. All in favor of accepting professional assessments for Tennessee Education Policy on first reading, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Reed. Item declared. Promotion and retention rule.
Good morning, Chairman Eby, members of the board. I am David Laird, Assistant Commissioner for Assessment and Accountability, and I am here to present on first read adjustments to promotion and retention rule 0520010316. The State Board Promotion and Retention Rule outlines promotion and retention requirements for K-8 students. The rule details pathways to fourth grade promotion for third grade students who score approaching or below on the ELA portion of the TCAP in accordance with TCA 49-6-3115. This item revises the rule to align fourth grade promotion pathways and the appeals process with Chapter 338 of the Public Acts of 2023. PC 338 amended the legal code to include an additional promotion pathway for third grade students who score approaching on the ELA portion of the TCAP. Starting with the 23-24 school year, third grade students who score approaching may be promoted to fourth grade if the student scored at or above the 50th percentile on the most recently administered state-provided benchmark assessment, and the student is provided tutoring services for the entirety of fourth grade. PC 338 also amended the parent appeals process to allow a school principal, guidance counselor, teacher, or other administrator to file an appeal for a student with written consent from the parent for a student who scored approaching on the third grade ELA portion of TCAP. This item also revises the timeline and the criteria for appeals as follows. Specifies that the Department of Education will open the appeals window no later than 5 business days after releasing individual student results to LEAs and public charter schools for the third grade ELA portion of the TCAP. It authorizes the commissioner to extend the 14-day timeline to notify students, parents, or legal guardian of an appeal decision if there are circumstances that require the department to request additional information. It also, for an appeal evaluated under Ground 1, removes the requirement that the student demonstrate growth in standards mastery based on a student score on a standards-based benchmark assessment. And finally, it clarifies for an appeal evaluated under Ground 2 for a catastrophic situation and specifies that documentation for an appeal must somehow show the catastrophic situation occurred on the test date or within 60 days leading up to the third grade TCAP administration or any makeup opportunities. The state board staff will hold a rulemaking hearing between first and final reading to collect public feedback. And the Department of Education recommends acceptance of this item on first reading, and state board staff concurs with the recommendation. I'm happy to take additional questions.
Questions?
Mr. Chairman, I do have a question. With the addition of the new pathway 6, I would appreciate it if you would help us understand in the appeals section, number 4, actually, I think it's listed as number 5, Round 1. I do recommend that you all look at the numbering and the lettering of those. But my point is on Ground 1, you share that you removed one of those grounds, but the one that is still remaining was one that was in effect for the past school year. And it talks about the students' demonstrated growth above the national norm. And last year, we used the 40th percentile for that national norm. And so students could be promoted and not be required to go to summer school or to be tutored in the 4th grade. So would you speak to the distinction and the difference with what was happening in the new pathway 6, because that one speaks to the 50th percentile must achieve 50th and above, or within the 50th, and have tutoring in the 4th grade. So help us understand that disparity, if you will, between the two.
So the department clearly recognizes that based on more recent changes to the law, there is now a misalignment between the prior existing appeals process and this new provision in law. And so the department is doing work now to consider an alternative approach to manage the 40th percentile, essentially that function in the appeal. And so we're looking at alternative ways in which we can identify students that are likely to achieve proficiency that would replace the 40th percentile requirement that previously existed as an appeal pathway, simply because it's no longer congruent with the new 50th provision or the 50th percentile provision that is now in law.
So with that statement, what is the expectation of when you may have that available to us? Because of course, we know we're under the gun from a timing perspective, and you would be expected to bring this back to us on final reading. Of course, as you already said, there will be the rulemaking hearing between first and final and rulemaking hearing. How's that going to play out? Because I'm thinking about the voices in my head that come from the school districts that are saying, we should have had this already, because they're preparing for the conversations that have to be held with parents about what's happening to their child. So if you would help lay the foundation for what we can expect there, really appreciate it.
I apologize, my answer will not be as satisfactory as anybody would probably like in this space, because everyone would love to have the answer to that question, given the stakes associated with it. The department will work as expeditiously as it can to try to make sure that we engage with state board and staff appropriately to get this policy or rule revised in the appropriate timeline for.
Other questions? Thank you.
I will say thank you, Dr. Laird. I know that you were put in this predicament, and I know that you all work as quickly as you possibly can. And it's unfortunate, as always, that these things happen and the districts are going to struggle with how they handle it. And I know that's never the intent, and I do want to acknowledge that. And I do want to acknowledge your great work in all honesty, because I think that can be lost in the message and in the translation. And I never want that to be the case, because I believe we are very fortunate and blessed to have you working in the department for the great expertise that you bring to the table. So thank you for that. And I know everybody holds an expectation that I know we're not going to have a special call meeting just to look at that, but whatever can be given to us as soon as possible. And maybe in advance of that meeting so that we are previewing it. And of course, I cannot say to districts, this is what it looks like, because the board still has to vote. So that's the challenge as well. Thank you.
Oh,
First of all, I just want to echo Chair Hargrove's, mostly just the importance of figuring out what this alternative pathway, if there is going to be one. I mean, my understanding is that last year, most of the appeals were granted through this ground one appeal process, which was essentially 40% or higher on a universal reading screener. Now the General Assembly has come in and said that you automatically advance if you score 50% or higher. And so that was an alternative way, but now it, as you said, it's not incongruous with the current law. So if there is an alternative way that you all recommend for us to identify those students who would like to be proficient, it's obviously good to know that. And the other question that I had, this came up in my one-on-one meeting, I went back and looked, in some of the new proposed language regarding the appeal under sub F1, it explicitly says that the LEA or public charter school shall inform the parent or legal guardian of the student's pathways to fourth grade promotion before the parent consents to the appeal form. And I was wondering if we should make clear in the rule that families need to be informed of these pathways, regardless of whether or not they're going to appeal. Just that this is something that all families should be notified of, because it's, for those of us who are familiar with it, who are close to it, it's an incredibly complicated system, and one where it would be great if there was some, and districts are incentivized, everyone I think is incentivized to want to communicate how this works to families. But it would be great, and I know that the department has documents I've seen that kind of show these different pathways. So just making sure that those are pushed out, but also considering putting that in the rule that districts have to inform families of what these different pathways are, because they're complicated and they have been changing.
I think one comment too. I think just as we're talking about the communication to districts and districts communicating back to parents, just I don't think you can start communicating too early. If I have a kindergartner who is having a hard time and I'm looking down the pipe at this and I'm making decisions about going to first or trying to do kindergarten again, like the social implications, how a kid might feel in regards to that would be different. I would think the younger they are, it's a little more normalized than they are. So just, I hate the feeling of like if the parents kind of moving along, they're not in the midst of all of this, and all of a sudden they hit a wall at third grade. Then they would say, man, if I'd have known when I was having parent teacher conferences and we were struggling early on. So just communicate like Mr. Holt said, but communicate across the board, like, hey, this is a process. So when you're getting benchmark assessments, when they're taking their, benchmarks along the way and all of the different grades, how is that projecting forward? Again, I think this is trying to empower parents as decision makers for their kids. So just, you can't over communicate it. You can't start soon enough, I think.
other questions or comments? I've got a couple. First, I think it's important to recognize that what we're voting on here has to be consistent with what the law is. And, the rule and the policy with the existing law. I do believe that there will be continued conversation between now and the next board meeting, and I encourage interested stakeholders, parents, district, et cetera, to continue that conversation. We want to hear, I'm sure the legislators want to hear. Parliament wants to hear as we move this thing forward. I would encourage people who was not tuned in yesterday to the workshop that we had. We had a very extensive discussion on this yesterday, which I think a lot of issues and points were brought up and, need to continue to be considered. So I encourage people to go back and find that section within the video to watch. I agree with all the comments that were made today with regard to the clarity of implementation. It is confusing to even people who have been listening to it on a regular basis. And so I encourage the department to make it as clear as possible to do that. And I did have one other question is, we talked about yesterday, we're talking about 12,000 students coming up in the coming years. And I don't know if this is a question for you or a question for you, Commissioner or whomever, but do we have the financial and teacher resources to provide the tutoring that's going to be required for those fourth graders next year? Or do the districts have those available?
I mean, they're doing it right now. So yes, they have the money this year. And then, TISA kicks in that $500 weight for early literacy support. But beyond that, that's where we're
It's
at.
not just financial, it's people resources too.
Sure, capacity, yeah, absolutely.
I think that's one of the biggest challenges I have is do we have the people?
Yeah.
I mean, we want to provide them. I mean, it's important that we provide them to give the resources to help these students, as you said yesterday, have an above average year. They need to have that. But we need to be able to give those resources and help the districts to do that.
Yeah, no.
We will
continue to work on that.
Mr. Moore.
To zoom way out, and to the people who may be coming across this for the first time, or the parents in particular who have not followed any of the conversations, I would just say I would summarize the heart behind this as nobody's trying to punish students, certainly. Nobody's trying to disadvantage any student. Nobody is trying to burden the system or our educators. The heart behind this mechanism is really to identify the students that need help and send them down a pathway, as we call it. Give them the resource that they need and the tools that they need, the student and the parents, to put them back on a healthy course. That is the heart behind this entire effort. And it's easy to lose sight of that, I think, when we start to grapple with a lot of the math and some of the complexities. But the goal here is to identify and help in summation.
Very well said, Mr. Mullenhour.
I want to ask one question to kind of piggyback off of what Ms. Mullenhour said. Is there going to be a way to sort of track the interventions, right? So for a school district that has X number of students that, this applies to, and then they go through one of the 6 pathways or more than one of the 6 pathways, and then there's going to be a result. And, as Commissioner Reynolds talked about yesterday, like, let's share great ideas. So if we can start tracking the effectiveness or the efficacy of a district's ability to move students through to enhance again, 16 to 20 days in the summer is not much, but who's doing it best, right? Tutoring can look a lot of different ways. Who's doing it best? And so I would just love to be able to sort of, if this is going on for a couple of years, to say, okay, who's doing this well? Who's actually getting kids who are being retained, potentially be retained ahead? Can we share that? And vice versa, where they're not able to do that. And so it's just who got identified as unable is still unable, and off we go. Like, to be able to have meaningful conversations with real data, I'd be fascinated with that.
Yeah, our Christy Brown, our CAO, has been working on getting some of that information together. So
Okay, that's awesome.
I'm working on it. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you. Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
One more quick question or comment. Would it be possible between first and second reading to look at the possibility of allowing students who go through the appeal route successfully to have the option of tutoring? And the reason I ask that is Ms. Morrison and I met with a parent who decided not to appeal, in part because she thought that her child would benefit from the tutoring. And if the appeal were successful, then
the student then would not be eligible for the tutoring. And so it seems like it would be a fairly small population, I would think, now that the 50% at pathway 6 is now going to capture a lot of who fell into the appeal route last year, potentially. If it's just the catastrophic and option 2 and then the ground 2 and then whatever ground 1 becomes. I just think that could be a worthwhile thing to do to allow those families not to have to make that choice between which I appeal. I think my child should be able to be promoted without having to go through all the interventions, but would still like the possibility of having the tutoring.
Measurement to be an impediment for kids to get the resources they need. So we don't want those provisions in law to be roadblocks for folks. Certainly makes perfect sense.
Any other questions or comments? We have a recommendation on first reading, promotion and retention rule. Is there a motion to accept that recommendation?
So moved.
Mr. Mullenhour moves. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Holt seconds. Is there further discussion? If no discussion, all in favor signifying in favor of promotion retention rule 0520010316, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, promotion retention policy. Mr. David Laird.
Good morning, members of the board. I am David Laird, Assistant Commissioner for Assessment and Accountability, and I'm here to present on first reading promotion and retention revisions to promotion and retention policy 3300. The state board's promotion and retention policy further defines aspects of promotion and retention rule 0520010316 for third and fourth grade students. PCA 49-6 outlines pathways for a third grade student who did not score proficient on the ELA portion of the TCAP to be promoted to fourth grade. For students who scored approaching on the third grade ELA portion of the TCAP or the TCAP retake, one of the pathways to promotion includes receiving high dosage, low rate tutoring for the entirety of fourth grade. For students who scored below on the third grade ELA TCAP, one pathway to promotion includes attending summer camp programming and receiving high dosage, low ratio tutoring for the entirety of fourth grade. Student pursues a promotion pathway involving fourth grade tutoring. The law requires that the student demonstrate adequate growth on the fourth grade ELA TCAP portion to be promoted to fifth grade. This item revises the policy to specify a definition of adequate growth on the ELA portion of the fourth grade TCAP. A student demonstrating adequate growth on the fourth grade ELA portion of the TCAP if the student meets or exceeds the student's individual fourth grade adequate growth target. The student's fourth grade adequate growth target will be calculated as follows. Step 1. The department will use the ELA portion of the third grade TCAP results and TVAS growth expectations to calculate the probability that the student will be proficient in ELA in the fourth grade. Step 2. A student's probability of being proficient in the ELA in fourth grade will be subtracted from 50%, which is the probability of a student scoring at the proficient cut score. Step 3. The remainder in step 2 is then divided by 8 to determine the student's individual fourth grade adequate growth target. The remainder is divided by 8 because students participating in statewide assessments from ELA in third grade to the 10th grade represents an 8-year period. For a student to reach the target probability of proficiency by the 10th grade, it's assumed that the student's growth target for 1 year on the fourth grade TCAP is 1/8 of the gap to the target probability of proficiency. The policy also specifies that a student also demonstrates fourth grade adequate growth if the student simply scores met or exceeds expectations on the fourth grade ELA portion of the TCAP. The revisions were also made to align the policy with revisions to promotion and retention rule 0520010316 that are being proposed on first reading at this meeting. The department recommends acceptance of this item on first reading and state board staff.
Thank you, Dr. Laird. Questions, Dr. Laird?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, Mr. EB Chairman. What I do want to make sure that we talk a little bit about this is that you did make a presentation to us yesterday in order for us to see the visuals, and you had several examples of what this would look like. So I do want the viewing audience to understand that when we vote today, we had an opportunity to see these examples and of course to read the policy and consider the things that you've presented to us today. Again, we do have the opportunity in first and final reading to hear from stakeholders, to get that feedback if there is any concern about what we approve on first reading, if in fact the board does go that route. So I just wanted to make sure that it was clear that if we are not having a lot of discussion today, it's not because we haven't already had it. We had it yesterday and there still could be more today. So I just wanted to mention that for the record.
Yeah, follow on to what I was saying on the other one is go back and watch, and there was extensive discussion on this.
Yes.
And I would just add the department really appreciates the push that we received from state board members and from staff about getting this right. It's one thing to have an incredibly accurate statistic, but if people don't understand it, it's really not serving its purpose, and trying to find the right combination of the two is really the exercise that we're working with here, and we're trying to get it right. We appreciate the feedback.
And just a follow-up to what I said too, is I do want to say, I think several of us said this yesterday. And so for those who did not listen yesterday and will not go back and listen to the workshop, we've asked that the department do whatever they can to provide the toolkit that gives real examples that teachers or principals or whoever the director of schools tasked with explaining this, that you give them some guidance as best you can, because you're the expert in this. And so I think whatever you can do to help in that regard, it would be a huge benefit to the districts. Thank you.
Other questions?
And not to go too far into the turf that we tread yesterday in the workshop, but just to repeat a couple of points that I think are important for those who might be watching today. The first is that the standard, as I understand it, is for adequate growth, for fourth grade promotion, is to identify for each student how far they are below proficiency, and then they would meet adequate growth if they close that gap by 1/8 in the next year. So statistically, there's probabilities that are going into effect to make sure that this is scaled correctly. But what we're seeing is this student who is below proficient, are they going to make 1/8 of that growth over the next year? Have they made that from third to fourth grade? Because if they continue on that same trajectory, then by 10th grade, they would be at proficiency. Is that generally speaking correct?
That is the core logic.
And then just another quick comment, which is my understanding is that from the department's projections, that this standard for adequate growth would result in approximately 5,000 to 6,000 thereabouts students being retained in fourth grade who would not make adequate growth, just based on historical numbers. I know that the effects of the interventions, we're hopeful and we believe that they are going to significantly decrease that number. But based on some of the department's projections, unless the law were changed, then there would likely be roughly 5,000 or 6,000 fifth graders retained. Is that correct?
And this year, I think that's accurate. There are so many pathways and so many elements to this. If any of those, say we move into next year, if any of those function differently, then this estimate at this point will change, because the population of kids might look very different next year than it did this year. But for this year, based on the data that we have, that's accurate.
The probability calculations come from TFOS. Will they be timely in being able to provide to the districts? September, October or something, or?
So we've been working very hard with our TBOS partners, not only in the development of this, but working out the timeline of this. We will have those results in June. We can say that we don't have an exact date yet, but we've got the framework of an agreement with our vendor to make sure that we can accomplish that. It takes a while to score PCAP tests. And that really is the driving factor for this. SAS has done this work for a very long time and they generally work very quickly. Given all of the high stakes associated with this, we also can't skimp on all of the quality control activities and processes that need to exist. So we're pushing this as fast as we can and we'll have scores in June. It might not be till the end of June, but that's what we're looking at.
Obviously, the sooner we can get it, the better for the parents, for the teachers to be thinking about how they can help, et cetera. I think that's critical. Question, is this the only pathway for fourth graders where they are? Those that are.
You mean in what is presently in law?
Yes.
Yeah, so our understanding of what is presently in law for these 12,300 students, that there is not another pathway for these children to be should they not make adequate growth. And of course, this won't supersede any other provisions law for students with disabilities and those sorts of things, but there's nothing specific in this law that gives another option.
And then the last question with regard to your statistics, 1/8 factor, I presume all your statisticians have looked at and statistically what it is 1/8, it's not some other factor. I'm getting questions from statisticians saying it's exponential or something and that the 1/8 is statistically not correct. But I'd say it's just a number that you took based on 8 years getting there. May not be statistically correct.
Well, to say that interval is always going to be equally an eighth. The core challenge we have there is less about the metrics, more about historical trends and proficiency rates in Tennessee. What we know about how those rates typically trend through middle school is that those rates actually decline. So no, the mechanic for setting the goals is actually more practically oriented. So we're taking the gap and we're dividing it over a period of time. It's not based upon actually mapping the trajectory of those students, because in that instance, those students are more likely to be proficient than they are.
Obviously, we want to continue to follow those students and continue to encourage them to have above average years every year. We're going to get them back on track. That's, as Mr. Mullenhour spoke about. I mean, I think that is the key, is that our heart is in the students. What can we do to lift them up? And that's what we need to focus on.
Mr. Chairman, a couple points of clarification for the statisticians that might be watching. My understanding of the math is it's only applied in that 1 year. It's not an eighth, and then the following year, an eighth of the remainder of what's left.
We never get there.
Left. So I think mathematically, statistically speaking, it's an eighth practically. It's only measured in a single year. The second thing, just a point of clarification. While this may be the only pathway for those 12,000 students, the law also provides that they will only be held back 1 year under any circumstance. So just to clarify for anybody watching, we're not going to have fourth graders getting stuck perpetually in fourth grade, because it's a 1 year application, and then after that, they're released to proceed. Please let me know if I'm misreading or misstating any of that.
No, I think both of those statements are accurate. So there is a provision in law that students are only retained in that year, and there's not a provision in law that means we'll continue to track these students after this year. So we are only applying this rule one time after they complete the fourth grade assessment. We'll of course continue to monitor how it's performing and how essentially effective we're being in differentiating students that all need proficiency, but there is no impact to the child's promotion based on future years.
So for the parents listening, no child is going to get stuck perpetually in fourth grade. That has been I think, a point of some misunderstanding.
Yes, Mr. Whalen.
So when we first passed this rule, I had a comment to kind of take us back to how we got here and why originally this came. And from the emails and text messages I've had, it didn't go over well. But so I wasn't going to say anything. But as we sit here, the train was coming towards a wall, and then kind of at the last minute, We had some exceptions and things like that. And I'm sure you guys discussed this yesterday when I wasn't here, but I feel like that train is going to hit another wall very soon if something doesn't happen. And the pressure has kind of gone down a little bit now that we got through third grade. But as these fourth graders now who had these appeals and exceptions, will not score proficient, that pressure is going to come back on us again. And so I hope we can keep this on the forefront. We're talking to our legislators and we're talking to our locals because it's gonna be probably even worse than last time. So I'm sure y'all are well aware of that and discussed it, but.
So you said it was already on the TVAS website for these current students, and you said it was pretty easy to do the algorithm if teachers wanted to do that. Fourth grade teachers, ELA, were in this year. Because we can't wait until February and tell them how to do that. How are you all communicating that to teachers right now? So if I were a fourth grade ELA teacher, I knew, Johnny is in one of those pathways. I need to make sure that he's getting there. And I'm meeting with him and talking to him. You were here, you've got to get here. And I know it's easy it's easy to say it on the website, but we need to have some sort of document saying, click here, do this, do that. Like, how fast can you get that out to teachers?
Well, I think we have to finalize this before I think we can communicate too much about that. But I'll say we know who these kids are now. And the most important thing is to use the best available information about what their strengths and.
The districts know who these teachers are now, right? The districts know who these teachers are. They have the direct relationship with their campus principals who should then be communicating with their teachers. Like, again, I've been thinking about this, the conversation we had yesterday and about what are you going to do? What are you going to do? What do you do? We're going to do all we can do to make sure that our leaders understand that this is coming down the pike. At some point, they've got to do their job too. And I know that they are aware of this issue because they're talking about it, right? So at what point, do we let go and let them do their job? And so we will definitely, again, to your points and what we talked about yesterday, absolutely, we're going to continue to communicate. If this has to be a perpetual talking point on every communication, email or physical, that I have to have with when I talk to the superintendents in their core groups and wherever communities I'm speaking to, I will do it. I promise. Let's make it a perpetual talking point, okay, team? But at some point, they know their teachers, they know their students. They've got to go in there and figure out how to support. They've got to go in there and make sure those tutors are doing the job they need to do. They need to also make sure that those tutors know how they're targeting the greatest needs of these kids, because at the end of the day, right, they also have the results of where these kids miss the mark. And what is it? Is it really an early literacy? Is it that K3 space that they missed, the actual foundational skills, or is it now really a comprehension issue, right? Is that where when they got into third grade and the comprehension piece really, because that's where TCAP really starts getting more complex. They have the results. They know where kids miss the mark. So those are the skills they should be targeting during this school year. Right now, they have the resources, they have the supports. How are they directing that? So it's an and, right? And I want to be helpful. We all want to be helpful because, we all want to see kids succeed, particularly in this fourth grade year. But micromanaging these directors is not the way to do it either, right? Because again, we don't have that direct communication. We have our teacher advisory groups, we have our engagement groups that we deal with, but we are not, we don't manage the teachers, right? We don't manage the principals. So
just resources, just a resource to say, hey, like this.
They have them. Yeah, they're using them right now. The kids have tutors sitting with them right now as we speak.
Just a way to show the TVAS that, just saying this is how you can click on here.
Absolutely.
And they have that resource to names. Okay.
Yeah, for sure. No, again, I'm not trying to say we're going to help, but I just want to create that balance, like for all us to recognize the balance, right? We will do our job, but they gotta do their job too.
And I would just add that the purpose of the TCAP is to summarize the breadth of what a kid learned across the entire year. It's not intended to be that diagnostic tool. It's not going to tell you the specific strengths and weaknesses that the kid has right now. And that's what teachers should be focused on. You have much better information about what individual kids' strengths and weaknesses are. And the best thing you can do is pay attention to that, move them as far as you can, use the better information that you have. And, you know, I realize that that's incredibly important, but let it summarize the performance at the end of the year, because it's just not going to give you the granular data that they need to train kids right now. It's not intended to do that.
That's Mr. Will.
And Commissioner, just kind of question to you, and this probably would have been better for the workshop, but we think the parents are getting the information they need. And I'm not saying it's the department's job, it's probably more local, but that's a worry that I have. I think you know, us who followed education policy, we all knew the third grade promotion when it was passed. We read about it, things like that. I was amazed at how many third grade parents just had no clue this was coming. And they get this letter. And so I haven't talked to parents that I know of that went through the process or that is currently going through the process. Do you think they're getting the information as they go, how serious this is, that if they're not going to be proficient here and meet that threshold, they are going to be retained in fourth grade?
I think it's absolutely fair to ask us, and you know, I'll talk to Chelsea. She couldn't come today, but you know, if we can figure out again through whether it's through our home literacy reports that we send out to parents right now, maybe we can dig a little bit more into our fourth graders right now. Think about that section of the law and section of our resources. If we can think about right now, maybe sending something out before the end of the year, just to kind of as a reminder for parents in general. I mean, I don't know, because again, we don't want to, like, you know, it'll be third, and then for these fourth graders, it'll just be a specific sliver of kids, right? So, you know, again, we have to balance that we're not freaking everybody out.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's very fair, a fair question for us to, in partnership with our districts. You know, I just want to make sure we're not also overstepping our bounds, right? Like, and so we will continue to talk about that and really appreciate. I mean, like, I'm not trying to dismiss, I hope, anybody, because I think these are all fabulous ideas, and I have lots of follow-up that I'm hopeful that we can tackle beginning when we get back on Monday.
To follow on Mr. Wells' point, as a parent of a current third grader, I do not believe that my family has received a communication yet from our school district about the third grade promotion retention law. And so whether it's the district whether it's the department including something like that on communications that go out to families from the department, if the state board puts in rule that districts need to be providing this sort of information because it's more appropriate to be coming from the districts than from the department, if it's both. I agree that, you know, we obviously don't want to be like hitting a panic button, but I think it is important for families to be getting that information. You know, to Mr. Morrow's point, the sooner the better. And you know, now that we're in November with a third grader, and I'm very well aware of the law because I'm sitting here. But if I weren't sitting here, I don't know that I would be. And my son's friends' parents who I interact with, I don't know that they're aware of it, other than if I volunteer to them. So I don't know the best way to get that information out there, but we may have a role in that as well.
And there is a requirement for the home literacy reports to go out, and I'm trying to think of the timing. You may know better, David. It may be like end of semester, but yeah, during this year you should be hitting, and it is in rule or policy. Angie can probably tell us, but
Christy,
it's a law. There you go.
Christy's here if we want to ask her. Christy, do you want?
Chief Academic Officer Department. We do want to continue with consistent communication efforts. I think that that's how we could, as a department, help with that. Maybe we have lots of toolkits for lots of things. So I'm thinking of once we have the rules in place and what we want to do there, but something that the districts could use or could customize to their own district, but it has a consistent messaging from the department that includes accurate and concise information for parents. I could see doing something like that rather quickly. As you all speak, I want you to know I'm in pretty constant communication with lots of superintendents over the last few weeks and over the last 2 days. As you can imagine. I do think that districts are aware, superintendents and principals are aware that we do have lots of engagement opportunities with superintendents, in particular superintendents, through the superintendent engagement group meetings that we have now quarterly. We may look at doing it more often than quarterly when things like this come up. We also have monthly meetings with the Superintendent Study Council Executive Committee monthly to get out any new messaging or anything new that comes up around this or other topics. So wanting to just really constantly communicate, get feedback from our districts, be a partner with them in communicating this message. I know Commissioner Reynolds in our updates that we send out for districts, that's weekly, right? So it's weekly. So make sure that that's included top of line, each time as we go forward. And these options that are available are communicated really consistently with parents and helping the districts and principals do that as well. And I did hear your comment about making sure that fourth grade teachers, I do think that's a responsibility, that principals and district leaders need to take on, but whatever we can do to get that message out through some, like we did with Chelsea, helping with our communications and being regular and consistent with that, we will work on it. I know it's crucial. And I do hear, I've talked to superintendents again very recently in the last couple of days, we've bet at every student that has required to have tutoring as a promotion pathway in fourth grade. We meet with them and we tell the parents that they have to receive this tutoring. It's that, we think it's effective and we've got the right people in the right places. And it's like, we want to make sure that there's not a sense of, well, that's not my kid. That's not going to be my kid. They'll go to tutor, they'll do the things. So I want to make sure that the gravity of what we're dealing with right now at this moment in time is communicated clearly. Teachers understand that. We don't want to cause panic of fourth grade teachers, but I do think that communicating what the stakes are is important. Thank you.
Other questions?
I was going to make a comment, but I do want to make sure that I preface it by saying, I think it's absolutely the right conversation to be had, to making sure that educators, third and fourth grade teachers are completely aware of what their role is in this entire process. But when we were talking about this morning, I'm thinking about there's no way, there is a way. However, what we're voting on today will be on first reading, and then not until February will we vote on a second reading. And so there could be changes in between now and then. So we cannot clearly communicate what it's going to look like for third grade students. You can give them an idea and you can certainly share with them what's been proposed with the possibility of tweaks or to get their feedback, certainly in between. So I think in terms of the finality of what will be approved for this group of third grade students, because they'll have the new sixth pathway, and we don't know what the appeal process will look like. I think it's just, that's something that they don't know what exactly to do with that. So, but it's not final. It's my point to be making. So, thank you. Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I just want to make Angie Sanders, General Counsel, one point about this discussion around the information that's going out to parents and what's currently required in the law. The home literacy reports that we were discussing, the law requires that if your child is identified on one of the screeners as having a significant reading deficiency, that you get a notification from the district that they've been identified as that. And one of the things that the law requires is that the parents be informed about third grade retention and pathways to promotion. So parents who maybe haven't heard of that yet, it may be because your child hasn't been identified as having a significant reading deficiency. What I'm hearing from the board is a desire maybe to expand that beyond just the children who might be having a significant reading deficiency. And so we can continue to talk with folks at the department about, do we want to expand that notification in the rule to apply maybe to at the beginning of third grade? Every parent gets a notification about, here's what the law says about promotion from third to fourth grade. So we can continue to look at that.
That's a good idea. Let me ask you a question. When you say significant reading deficiency, how's that significant defined? Is that people who are going to be below, or what about those approaching? But if we do what you're saying, it really won't matter, other than I think all parents need to know where their children are in reading, whether it's significant or not.
It is defined in the law as a student score on the universal reading screener within the range of scores determined by the department.
Below the 15th percentile on their universal reading screener, which is the significant reading deficiency, and below the 40th. The parents are required to receive a notification under 15. I think the practice in at least some districts are, you're notified if they're in the 70th. I mean, wherever they are, wherever their progress is, that would be important for me as a parent to know that about my child, regardless of what percentile they fall in, but it is required under the 15th percentile.
15 is pretty low. I mean,
Yes, sir.
Mark.
Go ahead. No, you go. I just, to expound on that, I think that's instead of if we can put that into rule of communicate where your students are, I think having if your student's rated in the 75th percentile and you draw a red line and a blue line where at this 40th percentile is where they're at risk, and here's the 15th percentile. This is when we would need to have this is when you're borderline, right? Like we're gonna have some conversations. I think that just over time, if there's universal reading screener and everybody has to collect this data on their students, then it seems as a fair partnership with families to, again, I'm saying that without knowing how much work that would take to involve for any of those things logistically, but informing a parent, here's where your child is reading, and you do that annually, semi-annually, and then here's your lines of sort of demarcation. I think that would be helpful, and starting before third grade. I
Gosh, yeah.
it's implementation, and I don't know the logistics.
Programs that districts use, like that is like you just click a button and then a report comes up. So it should not be.
It shouldn't be complicated. I didn't want to assume that. I was wondering, but I didn't want to assume. Thank you.
I think real quick, the issue is when we then inform families of the third grade promotion system. Like, do we do that with all families? Do we do it below 15%? Strikes me as too low. How you got people from 15 to 50% who would not likely be promoted absent some interventions, depending how they do in the TCAP. But whether it's all families or if it's just below 75 or something like that, I think families, I mean, at least I know that we get communications with that sort of information about, how our sons are doing. But then what I've not seen is then the information about the third grade promotion.
There's a way we could provide information at the same time. Here's where your child is. Here's what the guidance or the requirements. It's not guidance, it's requirements. So you can kind of compare where your child is to the law and the policies that are in place. Maybe that's something we could work with law.
I don't think it needs to be a secret. I mean, a more informed populace, more engaged populace. So why not tell everybody?
Any further questions or discussion?
I just want to comment, Mr. Chairman. Just to build on something that was said a few minutes ago, and this will not be a popular statement among some, but I think it's important to say for the purpose of serving the students, we could craft an absolutely theoretically perfect policy or rule on this particular matter. But at the end of the day, there are other actors here. It's not just a matter of informing the parents. It's also a matter of informing local school boards, superintendents, principals, and the management and leadership teams within schools, because there will be instances across this state in which students are not reading proficiently, not because of their inability to do so, but because the material is not being taught correctly or in the right ways or by the right people in that particular classroom. And kind of like we discussed yesterday, one of the things that we can do is we can shed light on where the issues are, and we can help bring resource to where the issues are. But people are going to have to make tough decisions at times about, does a given teacher need to be retrained in how the material is being delivered, or does that teacher need to be removed to teach a different subject because students are coming out of that classroom not reading proficiently or not being given the tools that they need. So I realize that's an unpopular position, but it's also part of the reality. We can shed light, but it's not this board's responsibility to dig into the details and, as was said, micromanage in the classroom to help these students. Others are going to have to come to the table and make some tough decisions. What we can do is we can shed light, we can communicate, we can provide resource, but others are going to have to step up here as well for the purpose of serving those students who are falling through some of these cracks.
Any other questions or comments? If none, we have a recommendation on first reading. Motion to retention policy 3.300. Is there a motion to accept?
So moved.
Chair Cobbin, Rollenauer seconds. Is further discussion? No discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed. Motion carries. We're going to take a break, and when we come back from the break, just recognize we kind of had this discussion more like a workshop discussion. I know it's informal. We need to get it back into a little more formality, asking to be recognized when we speak. We'll take a 10-minute break. 10:56. We'll come back at 6 after.
Good job on that.
Next week.
Next item is charter schools rule. Mary Ann Dursky.
Morning, board members, Mary Ann Dursky, Chair, Chief Medical Officer for the department. Here to talk about the charter school rule. The Tennessee State Board of Education Charter Schools Rule 0520-14-01 outlines the operational elements of charter schools, including approval of charter schools, allocation of state and local funds, and enrollment processes. Rule section 0.01 details the process for the approval of new charter schools. Section 0.03 details the allocation of state and local funds to charter schools. And section 0.04 details enrollment for charter schools. This item proposes the following revisions to approval of Charter Schools Rule 0520-14-01-.01. It clarifies language throughout the rule to distinguish between the steps that must occur during the initial application process and the amended application process. It clarifies the requirements that a local board of education shall include reasons for denial of an initial charter school application, and further aligns to the application process outlined in the state board's quality charter authorizing standards. Secondly, the item proposes the following revisions to the allocation of state and local funds rule 0520-14-01-.03. It clarifies that initial allocation of funds for public charter schools shall be set forth in the local Board of Education's budget that is submitted to the department. For the purpose of initial allocations, it requires the department to pull information on the charter school's average daily membership and student counts from EIS, our student system of record, and to pull budgeted local revenue information from the state-approved LEA budget, and to include those funds in the initial funding estimates shared with authorizing LEAs and public charter schools. For the purpose of interim and final allocations to public charter schools, it clarifies that the final average per pupil funding amount is based on the LEA's final expenditure report submitted to and approved by the department. It requires the department to report to each authorizer and public charter school the final amounts to be paid to the charter school within 5 business days of the state's approval of the LEA's final expenditure reports. Revisions also require LEAs and public charter schools to process final payments within 30 calendar days of the department's report on final amounts. And finally, this item proposes the following revisions to enrollment rule 0520-14-01-.04. It aligns the language in the rule with Chapter 206 of the Public Acts of 2023, which authorizes a charter school to give enrollment preference to students who are economically disadvantaged and preference to children of an employee of a charter school. The state board staff will hold a rulemaking hearing between the first and final reading to collect public feedback. TCA 49-1-12 requires that the department prepare a fiscal analysis of any policy, rule, or regulation proposed to the State Board of Education. This item has no financial impact on the LEA. This item supports the State Board's strategic focus on engagement and accountability outlined in the master plan by further clarifying specifics for charter schools and authorizing LEAs in the implementation of this rule. The Department of Education recommends acceptance of this item on first reading, and the State Board of Education staff concurs with this recommendation. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Dursky? I have one question. It says that it authorizes a charter school to give enrollment preference to students who are economically disadvantaged and preference to children of an employee at a charter school. Is that preference, is that something that's quantified or is it just general overall?
I believe it clarifies that while it's not required, the charter school may choose to give a preference, and then it is placed in the order of preference in the rule. For example, economically disadvantaged is the second item in order of preference.
Other questions? No questions. We have a recommendation on charter school. 501 for motion. Seconds. Or seconds, any further discussion? No discussion, all in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Smith. Next item, graduation substitution policy, Ms. Christie Morris.
Morning, Chairman and board members. Christy Wall, Department of Education, Assistant Commissioner. The State Board's graduation substitution policy 3.103 outlines an allowable course substitution for graduation requirement credits. This item revises the policy to clarify that a student's fourth credit of math or third credit of science is not required to be completed in a student's fourth year of high school or third year of high school. The revision clarifies that students may complete their required fourth credit of math and third credit of science at any point during high school, as long as they meet the course requirements outlined in State Board of Education's graduation requirements rule 0520-01-03-0.06. This item also makes minor clarifying edits to the course substitution descriptions for English 3, English 4, and personal finance. The Department of Education recommends acceptance of this item on first reading. State Board staff concurs with the recommendation. I'm happy to take any questions on this particular item.
Questions for Ms. Wall? The clarification point, it was a little confusing to me. You can get your fourth credit of math in a year in high school, but you're still required to take math that senior year.
That's correct.
Now.
That's correct.
All right. Any other comments or questions? We have a recommendation for graduation substitution policy 3103. Is there a motion to accept that?
So moved.
Mr. Jensen moves. Do I have a second? Second. Chair Cobbins seconds. Any further discussion? No discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Next item, Catherine Johnson, Tennessee.
Hello, Catherine Johnson, Deputy Director of Academic Policy for the State Board of Education. PCA 49-1-311-313 sets out the process for the Tennessee Academic Standards review in the 4 core subject areas of math, ELA, science, and social studies. In June 2022, the State Board began its review of the social studies standards in compliance with this law and policies. After 2 rounds of public feedback and revisions by Tennessee educator teams, the Standards Recommendation Committee, appointed by the Governor, Lieutenant Governor of the House, the SRC approved and made final recommendations regarding the new standards during their September 28th, 2023 meeting. Some of the major changes that happened in these standards is the SRC chose to keep Tennessee history in 5th grade. They moved U.S. history down to 3rd and 4th grade, and the geography unit previously in 3rd grade was moved to 5th grade in preparation for ancient world history in 6th grade. Additionally, Tennessee history was ensured to be represented not only in the 5th grade Tennessee history course, but throughout all U.S. history courses. And the contemporary issues high school elective was reworked to make it more consistent and allow more flexibility for teachers as issues change and evolve over the life of the standards. The State Board staff recommends acceptance of this first reading, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you. Questions for Ms. Johnson? Got a couple of questions. First, we had a good discussion on this yesterday during our workshop. Basically, how is it determined which historical facts are removed and which ones are added in. I'll give you an example. As a removed due to time constraint, Aristotle, Plato, and Socrates' impact on education in Greece. And then added in new standards like Mandate of Heaven, Zhou Dynasty. So how are those decisions made?
Yeah, so these decisions are made by the expertise of our educator teams as well as the standards recommendation committee. For example, the educator advisory team averaged 19 years of classroom experience across the teams. And some of the things that they consider when deciding what is included and what isn't is things like consistency. So are we covering similar topics in history in similar manners to make it clear for students? Is a topic they're learning in 6th grade necessary for information they're going to learn in world history in high school? And what impact does it have on their current lives today, right? We would love for everyone to know all of history, but there's a lot of it. We can't cover all of it. So they really try to focus in on what's the most important for consistency's sake, for the development and growth of the students' knowledge over time, and applicability to their present day lives.
Any other questions?
I do have a comment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yesterday, your time was really cut short in presenting the extensive work of the committees that work together. And I think it's important to acknowledge that this started in June of 2022. And so here we are in November 2023. So there was a lot of work that happened during that period of time, and the way that you described the way the teams worked and some feedback that you provided, Chairman Eby, about how involved and how it was not a slam dunk and there was rich discussion along the way. So I think it's important to acknowledge the great work of the educators and the experts that came together to produce the recommendations that are before us today. To make sure that they know we really appreciate what they've done and your partnership with them.
So one question, and forgive me if I had to step out yesterday, so forgive me if you already answered this, but I'm trying to follow the sort of post SRC meeting action on the executive summary.
Sorry, say that one more time.
Okay, so on the executive summary, attachment 1, the executive summary, there's a post SRC meeting action. It talks about a letter from the House of Representatives Education Subcommittee.
Yes, so
Just explain, so that they wanted BCAD versus BCE, CE. And I'm trying to figure out what actually happened, but
yeah,
I didn't understand it.
at their August 31st meeting, the Standards Recommendation Committee did vote to finalize the standards and send them to you all. However, they did receive a letter from the state legislature after
They
that
voted,
date.
okay.
So the chair, in consultation with state board staff and the other SRC members, chose to hold a meeting to make the changes requested by the state legislature. And so that is what the September 28th meeting was. So they opened the standards back up, made those changes, and then voted again to submit to you all for approval.
So what was the outcome?
The outcome was in the standard 6.01, it was left as it's currently taught, which means it refers to both BCAD and BCE CE. And then in the unit headings in individual courses, rather than referring to it as BCE CE, they reverted it back to AD or BCAD.
This may be an operational question, so
Yeah.
it's not relevant, just say so. So if I'm looking at, is that up to the teacher to pick which the designation is there recommended in the guide? Like, how does that translate down?
Yeah, so in terms of the 6th
Implementation.
grade standard, it is expected that a teacher teach that both of those label systems exist.
Okay.
They are on the same, function on the same timeline, it's just different ways of referring to it. And then as for the overviews, those are just information for teachers. And so those do not directly apply to what a student may or may not learn. And there's no other standards that refer to specific timeline designations other than standard 6.01.
Other questions? One follow-up, I was gonna say something too, like Chair Hargrove did with regard to our thanks. What I would like to do is send a letter from the state board to each one of the members of the Standards Review Committee. They did spend numerous hours giving our thanks. No other questions? We have a recommendation to approve the standards reviews. The academic standards for social studies. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Mark moves. Is there a second? McIntyre seconds. Further discussion. Favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. And we move into the items for final reading. Action item for final reading. First item, physical education course study. Lori Pacey.
Members. I'm Lori Peay with the Department of Education, Assistant Commissioner of the Division for Municipal Health. I'm here to present the physical education course standards. TCA 491302A8 authorizes the state board to set policies governing all academic standards and courses of study in public schools. Additionally, State Board Rule 0520-01-03-.031 calls for the state board to adopt standards for each subject area grades K through 12. The approved standards are to be the basis for planning instructional programs in each local school system. State Board Standards Review Policy 3.209 requires that the board review all sets of academic standards at a minimum of every 6 years. The Tennessee Department of Education conducted stakeholder outreach during the 2022-23 school year to identify revisions to the physical education standards, including but not limited to the following opportunities: the Tennessee Association for Health, Physical Education, Recreation, and Dance Annual Convention, which was in October of 2022, via email with the statewide physical educator listserv in January of 2023, and various efforts through coordinated school health coordinators throughout the 2022-23 school year. These stakeholders include Tennessee physical education teachers, curriculum leaders, and higher educational faculty from across the state. This item includes new and revised standards for each of the following grade bands: K through 5, 6 through 8, and 9 through 12. Standards revisions in grades K through 5, prioritized optimizing clarity for teachers to observe and assess students, and expand some lesson focuses to include multiple domains. Standards revisions in grades 6 through 8 better support the transition from foundational skill to skill application and transferability. Restructured standards to pair outcomes in both the psychomotor and skill domain and the cognitive domain, adjusting sequencing to suggest ease of facilitation for skill acquisition, and combining grades 7 and 8 as a singular benchmark. Standards revisions in grades 9 through 12 include appropriate language updates to better align with the changes made in grades 6 through 8 standards, and elevate verbs in the cognitive domain. Between first and final reading, the following revisions were made. Grades K through 5 standards, the jump and land for distance standard and jump and land for height standards for kindergarten were both updated to clarify both a 2-foot launch and landing. Minor clerical edits were made to the introductory page. In grades K through 8 standards, 6 through 8 standards, the phrase includes all teammates was added to the effective invasion games standard. An effective outdoor pursuit standard for both grade bands was created to include safety components. There were no revisions made to grades 9 through 12 standards. The Department of Education recommends approval of this item on final reading, and the state board staff concurs with this recommendation. Happy to take any questions.
Questions for Ms. Paisley? I'll make a couple. I think people know I have a passion for physical education. I was reading just this about less than a month ago that the obesity rate, childhood obesity rate in Tennessee now is 42.8%. Like was also reading a book called Brain Rules that highlights the benefits of education, mental education, and thinking school that students that are physically active, how much better they do in schools. So continue to encourage our schools to keep at least 50 minutes, meet the laws as required. It's important.
Just since you brought up, what is the minimum requirement? You know,
Is it 50 minutes?
We have minimum required, we have a physical activity law and a physical education law. And so it's different from elementary, middle, and high schools. Our elementary students must have more physical education and physical activity during the school day.
I mean, what, do you know what those two numbers are? I can't look it up, that's fine.
Go ahead, you know.
No, you go ahead.
For some reason, it's 50 minutes a week.
I thought it was 90, but I could be.
I don't, we can look it up. But it is important that we meet those. There's a Tom Cronin Act which requires that.
I knew that.
And unfortunately, we don't have 100% of our schools that are meeting the Tom Cronin Act. That's significantly lower than that, but we're gonna pay for it now, or we're gonna pay for it later. Through healthcare costs and insurance, et cetera. And getting our students off with the right attitude toward physical fitness now is important. I'll get off my soapbox. All right, we have a recommendation. Do we have a motion? Yeah. Wells moves. Is there a second?
Second.
Chair Hargrove seconds. Physical education core standards. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Paisley. Next item, healthcare standards.
I'm Lori Paisley with the Department of Education, Assistant Commissioner for Municipal Health. And I'm here to present the health education core standards, TCA 49-1-302A8. Authorizes the State Board of Education to set policies governing all academic standards and courses to study in the public schools. Additionally, State Board Rule 0520-01-03-.031 call for the State Board to adopt standards for the subject area grades K through 12. The approved standards will be the basis for planning instructional programs in each local school system. State Board Standards Review Policy 3.209 requires that the board review all sets of academic standards at a minimum of every 6 years. The Tennessee Department of Education conducted stakeholder outreach during the 2022-23 school year to identify revisions to the health education standards. The stakeholders were recruited through recommendations from coordinated school health coordinators across the state. The participants were divided into 3 committees: elementary, middle, and high school, and included health education and lifetime wellness teachers, school counselors, school nurses, and coordinated school health coordinators. The committees have representation from each of the grand divisions of our state, as well as 1 member of higher education faculty. This item includes new and revised standards for each of the following grade bands: K through 5, 6 through 8, and 9 through 12. Standard revisions in grades K through 5 were made to better address the developmental levels of elementary students. Grades K through 5 standards now include vaping prevention and occupant bike pedestrian safety. Grades K through 6 include new and revised standards for the following components and subcomponents: in personal wellness, general health, nutrition, physical activity and fitness and disease prevention, and safety and prevention, vehicle occupant safety, water safety, prevention, which includes bike, pedestrian, and weapons, and technology safety. In human growth and development, relationships, pregnancy and reproduction. Substance use and abuse, we have core concepts, refusal and risk reduction. And in mental, emotional, and social health, conflict resolution, social health, and mental health, which includes depression, stress, and community resources. Grades 9 through 12 lifetime wellness include new and revised standards for the following: personal wellness, disease prevention, and first aid and safety, vehicle driver and occupant safety, Human growth and development has relationships and adoption. In mental, emotional, and social health, emotional health includes developing self-care and adverse childhood experiences. And mental health includes when to seek help. In substance abuse and use, we have risk reduction. Between first and final reading, the following revisions were made. In grades K through 5 standards, the emotional wellness component had 2 components that were repeated, and both of these were deleted. The hazardous substances component was reformatted, which caused a code change for S.7. The physical safety component was updated to include firearm prevention based on stakeholder feedback. Additionally, the numbering of each standard was corrected due to formatting updates. In grades 9 through 12 standards, 6 of the mental, emotional, and social health standards were inadvertently placed in the personal wellness section. This was corrected by moving those standards to their appropriate section. No revisions were made to grades 6 through 8 standards. The Department of Education recommends approval of this item on final reading, and the State Board staff concurs with this recommendation. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Ms. Paisley?
Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Miller.
I have just a comment. With respect to the firearms training, I just wanted to flag for the department and really for anybody who's listening. There's a program that the National Rifle Association has had in place for, I think, a few decades now, many years, called Eddie Eagle. And through that program, I was just on their website a moment ago, they provide free material to parents, schools, books, stickers, specifically designed for K through 4. So I just want to flag that to the extent that those resources can be made available. Most of them are free. They actually have a grant program as well. So for anyone who's thinking about how to implement that particular change to this the standard, there's some great material that's already available.
Thank you. Other questions? Just a couple of comments. Let's go back to it is 130 minutes of physical activity for elementary school, 90 minutes for middle school, and 90 minutes for high school. That's physical activity, and then physical education is a subset of that. So, and I guess as a coordinated school health act is where they report compliance. It would be nice to know how many districts are in compliance. Sometime when you get a chance, that would be helpful.
We do have a report from last school year on our website. I think would answer your question.
Thank you. We have a recommendation for the health education course standards. Is there a motion to accept? So, well, Mr. Jensen, did you say? Second. Further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next item is Ms. Deborah Knoll, Career and Technical Education Course Standards. We are running behind, so can I just ask, we have the cover sheets that you read, people just summarize those.
Absolutely. Good morning, Chairman Eby and state board members. I'm Deborah Knoll, Assistant Commissioner of College, Career and Technical Education for the Department of Education. I'm happy to be here today to present on final reading the Career and Technical Education Standards. As a summary, we included new and revised course standards for the following CT career clusters: advanced manufacturing, agriculture, food, natural resources, arts, AV, technology, communications, business management, administration, and health science. The department held open comment period between the first and final reading on the proposed standards, with no additional feedback was submitted on the course standards. However, final minor changes were made. There was a minor clerical edit made to all course standards. The A was deleted in the heading using A work-based learning in your classroom. In the Welding 1 course, a minor edit was made under the Welding Procedure Specifications 8.3 to add the words "and how to" for clarification. And in the Principle of Farm and Agribusiness Management course, an edit was made to the Sales and Marketing 5.4 standard to change the word "assemble" to "document" for clarity. The Department of Education recommends approval of this item on final reading. The state board staff concurs with this recommendation. I'm happy to address any questions.
Any questions for us? I think you heard today that several of our board members are very interested in CTE, and good to see that. No questions. Is there a motion to accept the career and technical education course standard? Mr. Morrow moves. Is there a second?
Second.
Our chair Hargrove seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next item is Noel, high school career education.
Good morning, Deborah Noel again, Assistant Commissioner of College, Career and Technical Education for the Department of Education. Happy to be here again today to present on the final reading for the high school career exploration course standards. This item includes 3 new career exploration courses for freshmen, sophomore, and junior students, as well as a revised career exploration course for seniors. These courses were developed and will be taught in partnership with the Jobs for American Graduates of Tennessee. The Department of Education recommends approval of this item on final reading, and the state board concurs with this recommendation. Happy to address any questions at this time.
Any questions for Ms. Noel? No questions. We have a recommendation for high school career exploration course standards. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Mr. Jensen moves. Is there a second? Okay. Mr. Wells seconds. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Noel. Thank you, Ms. Angie Sanders.
Thank you, Chairman. Angie Sanders, General Counsel for presenting on final reading rule of 520-01-02-0.09. This rule sets forth requirements for the operation of alternative schools and alternative programs. We have made a number of revisions to align the rule with recent legislation, as well as clarifying that students assigned to alternative schools or programs can be served per education rule. We did hold a rulemaking hearing. There were no comments received at that hearing. Since first reading, we've corrected some minor typographical edits, and we've also used language that was in the alternative education policy, which we voted to repeal on first reading into this rule so that we could repeal that policy. That's the majority of the new language that you're seeing here. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Ms. Sanders? No questions. We have a recommendation for freaking school operations alternative rural education 0520010209. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Your Hargrove moves. Is there Mr. Mullenhour seconds? Further discussion. This will require a roll call vote. Mr. Griffin.
Mr. Cobbins. Aye. Ms. Cox. Ms. Hargrove.
Aye.
Mr. Holt.
Aye.
Mr. Jensen.
Aye.
Ms. McIntyre.
Aye.
Mr. Mullenhour.
Aye.
Mr. Morrow.
Aye.
Who else?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, you have 9 ayes.
Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Sanders. Next item, academic and instructional requirements. David.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, my name is Jay Baker with the Department of Labor and Workforce Development. I'm the Assistant Commissioner of the Adult Education Program, here to present for your consideration the Academic Program Requirements Rule and Civics Rule for final reading. This is final reading of an item to revise the Academic Instructional Requirements Rule to create a new pathways to a high school equivalency program and align with recent legislation. The rulemaking hearing was held on October the 2nd. No comments were submitted. And since first reading, minor changes were made for clarity based on feedback from the Attorney General's office, simply to clarify the age requirement. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Baker? We have a recommendation for academic and instructional requirements, academic program requirements. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Jensen moves. Is there a second? Second by Vice Chair Cobbins. This again requires a roll call vote.
Mr. Cobbins.
Aye.
Ms. Hargrove.
Aye.
Holt.
Aye.
Jensen.
Aye.
McIntyre.
Aye.
Mullenhour.
Aye.
Morrow.
Aye.
Wells.
Aye.
Eby. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, you have 9 ayes.
Motion carried. Mr. Baker.
Thank you. This is the State Enrollment and Attendance Guidelines Rule, Final reading of the items proposed technical revisions in alignment with public chapter 114 of 2023. Remove specific references to the GED or high set assessments and refer instead to a high school equivalency credential approved by the state board. A rule hearing was held on October 2nd. No comments were submitted. No changes have been made since first reading.
Have a recommendation. Any questions for Mr. Baker? No questions. As a recommendation, do we have a motion?
So move.
Vice Chair Cobbins moves.
Second.
Chair Hartgrove seconds. This will require a roll call vote on state enrollment and test graduation guidelines.
Collins.
Aye.
Hargrove.
Aye.
Holt. Henson.
Aye.
McIntyre.
Aye.
Mullenhour. Morrow.
Aye.
Wells. Mr. Chairman.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, you have 9 ayes.
Motion passes. Next, employment standards for supervisors rule.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is the employment standards for supervisors rule and the employment standards for additional support personnel rule. This is final reading of the item to propose technical revisions in alignment with chapter 114 of 2023. Remove specific references to the GED or high set and refer instead to a high school equivalency credential approved by the state board. The rulemaking hearing was held on October the 2nd. No comments were submitted and no changes have been made.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. Do I have any questions for Mr. Baker? No questions. We have a recommendation. Is there a motion to accept the recommendation for the rule?
So moved.
Chair Hartgrove moves. Is there a second?
Second.
Vice Chair Cobbins seconds. And this will require a roll call vote.
Collins.
Aye.
Hargrove.
Aye.
Holt.
Aye.
Henson.
Aye.
McIntyre.
Aye.
Mullenhour.
Aye.
Morrow.
Aye.
Wells. Mr. Chairman.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, you have 9 ayes.
Motion passes. Item standards for school administered child program staff rule. Mr. Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is the standards for school administered child care programs staff rule. The final reading of the item to propose technical revisions in alignment with public chapter 114 of 2023 to remove specific references to the GED or high set and refer instead to a high school equivalency credential approved by the state board. The rulemaking hearing was held on October the 2nd. No comments were submitted. No changes.
Any questions for Mr. Baker? No questions. We have a recommendation for standards for school administered child care program staff rule. Is there a motion?
So move.
Mr. Morrow moves. Is there a second? Mr. Jensen seconds. We'll recall a roll call vote. Mr. Griffin.
Mr. Cobbins.
Aye.
Ms. Hargrove.
Aye.
Mr. Holt.
Aye.
Mr. Jensen.
Aye.
Ms. McIntyre.
Aye.
Mr. Mullenhour.
Aye.
Mr. Morrow.
Aye.
Mr. Wells.
Aye.
Mr. Eby.
Aye.
Chairman. Mr. Chairman, you have 9 ayes.
Mr. Baker, thank you, and thank you, Mr. Partner. Item, public records report.
Chairman Angie Sanders again, General Counsel for the board, presenting on final reading revisions to the public records request rule 0520-15-01. State law requires all state government entities to promulgate rules governing public records requests. We did hold a rulemaking hearing on the revisions that were proposed on first reading on October 2nd. We did not receive any comments during that hearing. Since first reading, we have made a few edits, mostly in response to the questions that came up at the board meeting on first reading. Those include adding language from statute, clarifying language regarding how requests for inspection or copies may be made, clarifying that charges may be assessed for requests to inspect records if redaction is necessary, and other minor edits to reflect current practice. We've also just made additional typographical edits to ensure consistency and readability. With that, I'm happy to continue.
Anders, are there any questions? Since we have a recommendation on public request rule, second final reading, is there a motion? So Mr. Wells moves, a second.
Second.
Mr. Holt seconds. Roll call vote, Mr. Griffin.
Mr. Cobbins. Aye. Hargrove.
Aye.
Mr. Holt.
Aye.
Mr. Jensen.
Aye.
McIntyre. Mr. Mullenhour.
Aye.
Mr. Morrow.
Aye.
Mr. Wells.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, you have 9 ayes.
Motion passes. Next item, educated students rule, Mr. Scott Henry.
Good morning, board. Just want to give you a brief summary here. The revisions, proposed changes to chapter 0520-1 -1 ratify the department's guidance by defining the responsibilities of the home LEA, the receiving LEA, including when a student with a disability is enrolled by the receiving LEA, how the home LEA and the receiving LEA should transfer the student's education records back and forth, how the receiving LEA is expected to serve the students with disabilities, and how funding is allocated between the home LEA and receiving LEA. Between the first and second readings, the name of the rule chapter was changed from education of incarcerated students to education of justice involved students. And that's based on two things, feedback from the Department of Children's Services. They use that language, and that language is also aligned with the federal level with the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. So at this point, the department recommends approval of the second reading, and State Board of Education staff concurs with the recommendation. I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions? The explanation on the name change. No questions. We need a motion to accept the education of incarcerated students rule.
So moved.
Second. Motion by Chair Hartgrove, second by Vice Chair Cobbins. All in favor, signify by, oh no, we have to do a roll call vote. Ms. Griffin.
Mr. Cobbins.
Aye.
Ms. Hargrove.
Aye.
Mr. Kroll.
Aye.
Mr. Jensen.
Aye.
Ms. McIntyre.
Aye.
Mr. Mullenhour.
Aye.
Mr. Morrow.
Aye.
Mr. Wells. Mr. Chairman.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, you have 9 ayes.
Motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Excuse me, the numbers, what are the numbers in, as we're now calling it, justice involved students across the state?
I don't have the numbers off the top of my head. It varies because they're in and out so often, but there's 17 JDCs, somewhere close to 600.
Thank you. Next item, education savings account rule. Ms. Amber Gray.
Good morning. My name is Amber Green. I'm the director of the ESA program. I'm here to present various sections of the education savings account rule on final reading. Hopefully we'll keep it brief as well. In July 2022, the Tennessee Department of Education began enrolling eligible students in non-public schools to participate in the education savings account program. CCA 49-6-2601 SB and Education Savings Accounts Chapters 0520-01-16 outline the student eligibility requirements and participation requirements of the ESA program. This item proposes changes to the ESA rule -0.02 through -0.06, -0.08, and -0.10 to align with legislation passed in 2023 and to provide additional clarity to the rules, Chapter 171 and Chapter 328 of the Public Acts of 2023. Change the eligibility requirements for students to expand the ESA program. This item also contains the following revisions to clarify operational aspects of the ESA program and address omissions. It addresses students with disabilities rights. It addresses minimum expenditures for account holders. It addresses school financial viability. Other changes to align with federal guidance. It specifies expense pre-approvals by the department. Amends the statutory citation in section -0.03 around BEP and TISA. The state board staff held a rulemaking hearing on October 2nd, 2023 to collect public feedback. No public comments were submitted at the hearing or in writing. Minor topographical edits were made between first and final reading. The Department of Education recommends approval of this item on final reading. The State Board of Education staff concurs with this recommendation. I'm happy to take questions.
Any questions for Ms. Green? Mullenhour.
Just a quick statement, Mr. Chair. My understanding is the definition of eligible student is prescribed by statute.
Yes.
I would just like to flag for any member of the General Assembly who would like to revisit the definition or help edit the definition of eligible student to include students from non-public schools. If there's an interest in doing so, I'd love to work with that individual, that member of the General Assembly to craft the language. And currently the way that the law reads is a family moving here from out of state would not be eligible for the program. Additionally, students who are in state but who are in a non-public institution would not be eligible unless they first go to a public school for a year, if I understand, at which point.
One point.
Yeah, please.
A student who was moving to the state of Tennessee for the first time, they would be eligible.
Okay, so I guess then I'll just underscore the point of, for the families that are already living here and who have students in non-public institutions, they would not be eligible to apply for this program as currently written, which I think is not in the best interests of all the kids. And I have a hard time with the idea of telling some families who are tax-paying, productive, contributing citizens themselves, no, your child is not eligible for this program, but another child is, based purely on the fact that they didn't attend a public school in the year prior. So invitation to the General Assembly if they'd like to take a look at this.
And I think that also addresses homeschool students unless they go into public school for a year, right?
That is correct.
Other comments or questions? All right, we have a recommendation. We had a motion. We get a motion. We need a motion. Morrow moves. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mullenhour seconds. Mr. Griffin, please call the roll.
Mr. Dobbins. Ms. Hargrove.
Aye.
Mr. Holt.
Aye.
Mr. Jensen.
Aye.
McIntyre.
Aye.
Mr. Mullenhour.
Aye.
Mr. Morrow.
Aye.
Mr. Wells.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, you have 9 ayes.
Thank you, Mr. Green. Next item, educator licensure, endorsement exemptions and permits. Read.
Hello again, Taylor Reed, Senior Director of Licensure, Educator Licensure Rule 0-02-03, Section -.11, governs the issuance of endorsement exemptions for individuals to teach subject areas in which they hold a valid license but do not possess the proper endorsement, while Section -.12 governs the issuance of temporary academic and occupational permits. Item makes revisions to endorsement exemptions Rule -.11 and permits Rule -.12 in accordance with Public Chapter 280 and 284 of the Public Acts of 2023. An emergency rule containing these revisions was approved at the June 22nd, 2022 special called meeting and is currently in effect. This item seeks approval of these revisions as a permanent rule. There were no changes between first and final reading. The Department of Education recommends acceptance of this item on final reading. The SBE staff concurs with this recommendations, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Ms. Reed. Any questions for Ms. Reed? No questions. Is there a motion to accept educator licensure rule?
So move.
Vice Chair Cobbins moves. Is there a second? Mr. Holt seconds. Mr. Griffin, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Dobbins.
Aye.
Ms. Hargrove.
Aye.
Mr. Holt.
Aye.
Mr. Jensen.
Aye.
Ms. McIntyre. Mr. Mullenhour.
Aye.
Mr. Morrow.
Aye.
Mr. Wells. Mr. Wells.
Aye.
Mr. Eby.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, you have 9 ayes.
Motion passes. Thank you, Ms. Reed. Next item, individualized education council rule, Ms. Williams.
I'm Sarah Williams, the director of the IEA program, and have just a few items to present. Individualized education and program is a social program for students with disabilities created by the Individualized Education Act. The state board has promulgated rules at chapter 0520-01-11. The United States Department of Education Office of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services revised guidance related to state-funded school voucher and scholarship programs in February 2022 and clarified that a child with a disability who received a state school choice voucher or scholarship retains the identification upon re-enrollment in a public school without undergoing any additional psychoeducational testing. Revisions to these rules are proposed to align with the guidance provided in OSEP Q&A 2201. To further align with OSEP guidance, revisions were made to clarify when a student has a right to a free appropriate public education or FAPE, waiving of accommodations under the Individualized Education Program or IEP, and development of an individual services plan or ISP to meet a student's special education needs. Additionally, language was added to specify that the IEA program is for grades kindergarten through 12 and to remove a reference in the rule to the GED and high set in sections 04 to align to the language with chapter 114 of the Public Acts of 2023.
State Board staff held a rulemaking hearing on October 2nd, 2023 to collect public feedback. No comments were submitted at the hearing or in writing. No revisions were made between first and final reading. The Department of Education recommends approval of this item on final reading, and SBE staff agrees with this recommendation. Anyone have any questions?
Any questions?
I do have a question and a comment. We've had a situation recently in Shelby County with a disabled student that really fit in under what you were talking about, Mr. Molinaro, that, and there, I think, and we need to, what I'd like to know is following up with the legislators around this issue of the 1 year eligibility. So they were able to figure out how to address that. This was a child who needed to go into a private school because they're the only people that, because of his disabilities, could accommodate his needs. And we've been through this whole thing about we can't do that because he was not in a public school the prior year. And so I just want to make sure that we are looking at that with the legislature and whoever else to address those, partly what Molinaro was saying, but more importantly, perhaps for students with disabilities where there are needs that cannot be met in a public school, that we address it. I'm not asking you to comment on that. I'm just saying if we could put that somewhere in the mix as we move forward, I certainly be happy to be a part of that.
Clarifying question on that?
Yes, Mr. Martin.
Thank you. How could a need not be met in a public school if it's an IEP is supposed to provide what's necessary?
Well, without getting into the specifics of this child, there's some severe issues. That there is a school in Memphis that's what they do.
Oh, that's what they do. Gotcha.
Yeah. So
best served by. Gotcha.
Right. Any other questions? We have a recommendation then for Education Council rule. I need a motion. Can we go with a motion?
So move.
Vice Chair Cobbins moves. Is there a second?
Second.
Will seconds. Mr. Griffin, you please call the roll.
Mr. Cobbins. Hargrove.
Aye.
Mr. Holt.
Aye.
Mr. Jensen.
Aye.
Ms. McIntyre.
Aye.
Mr. Molinaro.
Aye.
Mr. Morrow.
Aye.
Mr. Wells. Aye. Mr. Chairman.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, you have 9 ayes.
Motion passes. Next item, license reinstatement and restoration of pages policy. No.
We have on final, Peay Danielle Nellis, Deputy General Counsel for the State Board of Education. We have on final reading the license reinstatement and restoration applications policy 5.500, which builds upon the provisions of State Board license discipline, suspension, and revocation rule 0520-02-03-0.09 to detail the procedures for reinstatement of suspended licenses, restoration of revoked licenses, and considerations for restoring a revoked license. This item proposes revisions to the policy to clarify the procedure that applies to someone seeking reactivation of a license that expired during the period of revocation. Revisions also modify the language referring to criminal convictions and notice requirements to incorporate the board-approved revisions to denial, formal reprimand, suspension, and revocation rule 0520-02-03-0.09. Minor edits were made between first and final reading for clarity. Edits include clarifying that educators who had their license revoked based solely on a conviction under TCA 4035-313, which is the judicial diversion statute, may apply for restoration of the license or reactivation of an expired revoked license upon receipt of proof of expungement. The State Board staff recommends approval of this item on final.
Recommendation. Is there any questions for Ms. Nellis? No question. Is there a motion to accept license reinstatement registration on page 5?
Move.
Vice Chair Cobbins moves. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconds. This does not require a roll call vote. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next item is gone.
Thank you. We have also on final reading, permit and license denial, formal reprimand, suspension, and revocation policy 5.501, which details the procedures followed in cases of possible license denial, formal reprimand, suspension, or revocation, and denial of a temporary permit. This item proposes revisions to the policy to align with the board-approved revisions to its denial, formal reprimand, suspension, and revocation rule 0520-02-03.09, incorporating statutory changes passed by the General Assembly during the 2023 legislative session. Provisions also modify the language referring to criminal convictions and notice requirements to incorporate the board-approved revisions to its rule. Since first reading, minor clarifying edits were made to ensure alignment of the policy with the state board rule and to include appropriate cross-references to board policy 5.500. Additional non-substantive edits were made for clarity. The state board staff recommends approval of this item on final reading.
Any questions for Ms. Nellis? No questions. We have a recommendation for final reading of permit and license denial, formal reprimand, suspension, and revocation policy. Is there a motion? Mr. Wells moves. Is there a second? Second. Ms. Mullenhour seconds. Any further discussion? No discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, Ms. Nellis.
Thank you.
Next item is textbook instructional material waiver request, Blount County Schools.
Hello, Catherine Johnson, Deputy Director of Development Policy. PCA 49-6-2206 provides the state board with the authority to approve or deny waiver requests from local education agencies that wish to use textbook or instructional materials that are not on the state approved adoption list due to unique or unusual needs of the PA. The state board's textbook and instructional material waiver rule 0520-01-18 governs the procedures for LEAs requesting textbook waivers from the state board. Blount County was granted an instructional and materials waiver by the Department of Education for use of Common Lit 360 materials for English language arts 1, 2, 3, and 4 in 2018. This waiver is expiring ahead of the new adoption cycle due to the statutorily authorized 1-year delay of ELA standards review cycle. In order to allow Blount County to submit an emergency instructional materials waiver request to continue to use Common Lit 360, the Department of Education waived portions of the state board's instructional materials waiver rule since reasons for the request fall outside of the reasons listed in the state board rule. In accordance with the requirements of state board's rule on instructional material waivers, Blount County Schools then submitted an emergency waiver request to the state board. State board staff requested subject matter experts at the department provide feedback on the proposed waiver materials alignment to Tennessee academic standards. Based on the subject matter review conducted by the department staff and additional criteria described in rule by the state board staff recommends approval of this item on first and final reading until the next ELA textbook adoption cycle. I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Ms. Johnson? No questions. We have a recommendation. Is there a motion to accept Blount County Schools waiver request?
So moved.
Chair Hartfield moves. Is there a second? Mullenhour seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Ms. Johnson. Next item, Tennessee Investment in Student Achievement. Deborah Nolan.
I say good morning, but I think it's probably afternoon. So good afternoon. I am Deborah Knoll, Assistant Commissioner of the College Career Education for the Department of Education. I'm happy today to present on the Career and Technical Education proposed chapter definitions and direct rule allocation rules. The TISA Act specifically requires rulemaking by Tennessee Department of Education in certain areas to define important terms and establish processes and procedures for funding disbursements. TEES requires the department to submit the rules to the State Board of Education for a positive, neutral, or negative recommendation and include State Board's recommendation in the filing of the rules with the Secretary of State's office. The department is proposing revisions to the following sections of the Department of Education's TEES rules. Chapter definitions 0520-12-05-0.02. We are including some removing of some definitions that are no longer used, as well as adding a few definitions around SOC codes, which is the Standard Occupation Classification System, and a new definition of wage earning potential. We're also taking into account the direct allocations rule 0520-12-05.05. The direct allocations rule contains criteria from the law which students generate a direct allocation funding. The proposed revisions to the direct allocations rules reflect input from CTE engagement groups that include members from the Tennessee General Assembly, the Tennessee Higher Education Commission, the Tennessee Department of Labor and Workforce Development, CTE teachers, directors, state board members, and other external partners. The new criteria will be weighted as follows for the overall funding levels: high wage 70%, high demand 20%, and high skill 10%. The Department of Education recommends the State Board issue a positive recommendation on these rule revisions, and the State Board staff concurs with this recommendation. I'm happy to address any questions at this time.
Questions for Ms. Noel? A couple of questions. I noticed there was some really good comments along the way from like Excel and Ed and various organizations. And response came back, said, since these were not a request for something we've done, no response was given. So you just ignore their comments, or?
No, we don't ignore their comments. No, the response that was not given is that there would be no changes to the rule based on their comments that were given to us. But we do respond back to them. The Excel and Ed comments in particular, one was just around the funding level. They wanted us to define that funding level. But that's based off of that allocation and the appropriations. So we are able to define that from the very beginning. The second one was about the SOC code determination. And we're engaged in that process right now with our career cluster advisory groups, with CTE directors, and then also with advanced CTE. And then the third point that they made was around the use of regional prevalence. And while we absolutely understand that and we are engaged with that, because it's not found in the rule, we are thinking about alternatives of how we can address that. One way in particular is that we will allow them to provide justification on their CLNA to say that maybe, you know, there's a huge prevalence of ag in our county. 60% of our land is used for ag purposes. With that justification, then what we would do is we would make that part of the Perkins Reserve allocation to go to that district to help as kind of like a stopgap, as well as new industries may be coming into the area. We know that there's a lag in data around the SOC codes and the wage earning around that. And so what we would do is allow them to also provide justification to say there's new emerging companies coming to the area. And again, we would take that into account when applying some Perkins Reserve funds as well.
Thank you. That was very helpful. So you have been responsive to them. You're just not.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Mullenhour.
Yeah, I'd like to just briefly recognize Deborah and her team. I had the opportunity to work closely with them, both, I guess, the early stages and then kind of the subsequent stages. And this is new territory. This is as a subcomponent of the overall TISA formula. This is new territory. As she indicated a second ago, more data will be coming in. There will be the opportunity to make further edits and modifications. But I would say that this rework effort, I think, does a material job of furthering us down the path of supporting and preparing students for future and for future success. And it was a lot of work, and there was a lot of creativity around this. I think there's still unknowns, and again, I think further data will help to solidify some of those. But you just did a great job on this, and I want to thank you for all the time and effort, because it was many multiples of hearings and Zoom sessions, and some during Christmas holidays, and they really did a heavy lift for us. Thank you.
Thank you for recognizing that, Mr. Mullenhour. We have a recommendation.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to ask for clarification, and I appreciate all the things that you said relative to the feedback that came to you, particularly the Excel and Ed, because they had some compelling points that they made. And I pulled out one because I honestly do not remember the language in the TISA law, but they mentioned that the law requires for you to promulgate rules to set direct allocation amounts for each of the 12 combinations. So, and then they gave an example of some areas for clarity. They talked about setting a CTE base and then having certain percentage above that based on the level of achievement, if you will, or the level of the offerings. So would you address that for us to help understand why that something like that was not included?
Absolutely. When we look at the allocation, two things that we have to keep in mind. First and foremost, it's based off the appropriations that is given to us by legislators, and that's not until early spring, summer. The second piece of it we have to take into account is student counts. So it's not a finite pot of money, so we have to take student counts into account when we're looking at the distribution. So until those two things come available, we're not able to tease out the way that they would want us to tease out with the different allocations and the percentages above and below.
And that would, so therefore you would keep the rule looking this way because that information would not be known. Every year, that would be new information provided.
New information, and we make our adjustments based on this. Yes.
Thank you.
Other questions? And again, we don't vote to approve, we vote for a positive or negative recommendation. We have a recommendation for a positive recommendation. Is there a motion to accept that recommendation for a positive recommendation?
So moved.
Mullenhour moves. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Jensen seconds. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next item is automatic teacher license actions. We have 3 on the automatic license. I understand there may be Mr. Alba who wants to address this group. Is that correct? That is correct. Not at this point in time, then. We're going to pull his out. Mr. Madison.
Good afternoon, Todd Madison, Associate Counsel for the Board. I'm joined by Peay Willis, Deputy General Counsel. First up, we do have the automatic teacher licensure actions. Collectively considering the item B and C. You want to take those up first?
Yes.
All right.
We'll address Mr. Alba after we do these others, sir.
So for items B and C, state law and board rule required the automatic revocation or automatic permanent revocation of an educator's license for certain criminal and classifications set forth in law. These individuals have either been convicted of specified criminal offenses or their conduct meets the classification as determined by the state board legal staff recommends approval of these actions.
A recommendation from the state board staff. Is there any questions for Mr. Madison? We're not voting on Mr. Alva at this point in time. We're voting on Taylor Cruz and Carrie Norman. Questions? Do I have a motion to accept the recommendations for those 2?
So moved.
Mr. Morrow moves. Mr. Mullenhour seconds. This will require a roll call vote. Ms. Griffin, please call a roll.
Mr. Collins.
Aye.
Ms. Hargrove.
Aye.
Mr. Holt.
Aye.
Mr. Jensen.
Aye.
Ms. McIntyre.
Aye.
Mr. Mullenhour.
Aye.
Mr. Morrow.
Aye.
Mr. Wells.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, you have 9 ayes.
Motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Madison. We've been requested to pull out Mr. Alva.
Yes, sir.
And I'd be greatly respectful to go forward at this time, or if y'all want to pass to the end, I'm fine with that as well. We'll go ahead and go with it now. Hold on a second. It's 7 o'clock. 3 minutes. My name is Kevin Poor, and 3 minutes is probably not going to be enough for me to say what I wish to say. My name is Kevin Poor. I'm an attorney in Cumberland County, Tennessee, and I represent Mr. Charlie Alva currently. In this case, we're asking Kate, this board to request the continuance, take action on this point in time. The actions, we feel that the actions of the petitioner do not rise to the level as indicated by BCS. There's a lot of different things going on in this case, but there was an incident that occurred at the school. Mr. Alva was initially charged with crime. He was charged with crime, and then it went through the process, and he was granted judicial diversion. He was charged with a felony. He entered a judicial diversion in June of this year to a misdemeanor, and at the end of that conclusion of that diversion, obviously all that record will be expunged. But this incident occurred at school. He was reinstated to teach by the local board of education, and there was a letter of correction entered into his file. A corrective action, I believe, is what it's actually called. It was entered into his file by the school, and I have a copy of that. And if anybody would like to see it, by the school, and they basically determined that this was an action that happened for some playful banter, I guess I should say. At that time, Mr. Alva, that happened on July the 10th, 2023. At that time, Mr. Alva thought this, the matter is kind of over with at that point in time. He went back about his job. On July 27th, 2023, the state Department of Children's Services did issue a letter indicating him as being indicated for child abuse. Mr. Alva took this paper and contacted his son, who's an attorney in Chicago, Illinois, and said, "Hey, what do I do?" His son said, "I'll contact the attorney that represents you down in Tennessee, and we'll have an affidavit from his son that says that he did these things." Unfortunately, he didn't contact the attorney in a timely manner, and there wasn't anything filed. Mr. Alva didn't know that it wasn't filed. Turned it over to an attorney, and he thought it was being taken care of. Quite honestly, it wasn't until he received a letter from this board dated September the 29th, indicating that he was supposed to be here today for a permanent revocation of his license. At that point in time, obviously, he freaked out a little bit, went and talked to the attorney, took the letter to the local attorney. At that point in time, it's like, what's going on? It wasn't until that point in time he found out that I hadn't been contacted. And so he took the only action he knew to take. He tried to reach out and get an attorney. As a matter of fact, he attempted to contact me, and I was out of town that week because it was fall break in Cumberland County, and I was not in the office very much. I was with my kids. Mr. Alva did all he knew to do at that point in time, which was fill out this thing and request a hearing, and he did so. It was denied because they said, well, you didn't file it timely, and you didn't, and there's no good cause shown. I was not an attorney, and he didn't know that you had to show good cause as to why you didn't file within the 20-day time period. So at that point, I think they issued a letter again denying because of that on October the 16th. It was shortly at that point in time when we came into communication, and we've been working very hard since that period of time. But he's only asking you to delay your actions here so that he can fully exhaust his due process rights. And I understand the state of Tennessee. By the way, I have spoken with Ms. Nellis on several occasions, and she's a very, very fine person, and has been very cordial during this matter. At the time, sir, your 3 minutes are up. 4 minutes and 15 seconds. Sorry, give you an extra minute. Sorry. I'm just saying, I apologize for taking a little extra time here. But heroes are people who make a positive influence in other people's lives. And I've got one here. Appreciate it. Thank you, Nellis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I echo Mr. Poor's sentiment that our conversations have indeed been very cordial, and I certainly commend his efforts. The applicable rule in this case is, of course, our discipline rule 0.20-02-03.09-4A2, which provides that the board shall automatically revoke or automatically permanently revoke without the right to a hearing an educator's license for being identified by the Department of Children's Services after having exhausted or waived all due process rights available to the licensed educator as having committed child abuse, severe child abuse, child sexual abuse, or child neglect as stated in TCA 495413. As Mr. Poor stated, Mr. Alva has made attempts to appeal the decision made by DCS, which he found out about this summer. In the eyes of the law, his request to review was not only untimely, but he received information in the October 16th letter from the administrative law judge on behalf who was overseeing this case, that his appeal was indeed untimely. He has exhausted his due process rights at this point pertaining to the matter before the board. As the law indicates, the board shall revoke or automatically permanently revoke his license because of the DCS substantiation. The reason that our case review committee consistently recommends automatic permanent revocation in cases where there is a DCS substantiation is because individuals who have been substantiated for abuse are not allowed to be on the grounds of a school or interact with children or be employed in this capacity while substantiation exists. So we certainly stand by our recommendation for automatic permanent revocation in this case. And I will say you all have heard things from Mr. Poor about his good character, and certainly we make no judgment as to that, but we are required to follow the law in this case. And so that is our recommendation.
Are there any questions for Ms. Nellis?
It seems to me that we don't have much of an option right now. What options does he have after this?
Certainly. Mr. Poor, as his attorney or any attorney that that Mr. Alva retains, or if Mr. Alva wants to proceed per se, does have potentially the opportunity to appeal this through Chancery Court. My understanding from our conversation, Mr. Poor and our conversation, is that he is going to reach back out to the administrative law judge, make his case regarding the good cause that he has stated before this board, and hope that they will hear this case once again. He also has the opportunity to appeal that to the Chancery Court as situations before this board would be able to be appealed to the Chancery Court. If for some reason they overturn their substantiation, he is welcome to submit a transaction into Encompass for reinstatement, restoration. I do that every time, I apologize, for restoration, and this board would be able to consider that.
So when we vote on this today, so he's currently employed teaching now, and then that would have to stop immediately.
Right. And because there is a substantiation and the school is aware, he actually should not be in a classroom right now.
Yeah, I'm going to rephrase what I understand the case to be, and if my facts are incorrect, please speak up. And I'm going to say, like, we're not a fact-finding tribunal. Whether it happened or not is irrelevant. The fact of the matter is, however, that Mr. Alva pled guilty to a misdemeanor assault. DCS has now substantiated the matter, which triggers the rule that says that we shall, the language is shall automatically revoke without a hearing. My understanding is that an emergency injunction was sought yesterday, and that was denied. The way I would phrase what has happened here is essentially a misdemeanor crime seems to have been committed. The local school district is now breaking the law by allowing Mr. Alba to teach or be on school grounds. And you're now here asking us to break the law
Well,
by ignoring the statute. So I'm trying to understand, what is the legal theory upon which you are before us today?
one of the legal theories too would be that you all are required pursuant to point or 0520-02 -03.-.09 4A2, the Rural Board of Education, that you are I'm sorry, it's actually 0.09. Oh, I was right. That you're required to send him notice at least 30 days prior to this hearing. Notice was sent on September 29th. It was not received by Mr. Alvin until, I believe, October 5th. It was either October 4th or October 5th. So you're violating the law if we go forward on that. If we go forward under that provision, because I'm not a mathematician, but you received it on the 4th. That would have been 27 days in October and 3 days today. Today would have been the 30th day. So that would not give him the appropriate 30-day notice. Again, I think that's somewhat of a ridiculous, but that's kind of the whole point that we're here today about.
When did the substantiation occur? What was that day?
Substantiation letter was sent July 27th. He received it October the 2nd.
Many months ago. So in my mind, that's the date upon which Mr. Alba should no longer be on school grounds.
At that point in time, he'd already been reinstated, and I don't speak for the school board in and of itself, but they employed him and he did his job and has continued to do his job.
So Danielle, what of my articulation of the facts you disagree with?
I don't disagree with any of your facts. I will note that even if he had not been convicted, because there is a substantiation, this board shall either automatically revoke or automatically permanent.
Is that subject to any kind of notice requirement whatsoever as Mr.
The revocations are not without hearing under our rule. I will note that we did send him the mail. We put the letter in the mail. I believe it was September 29th. I have Mr. Bates is pulling up our specifics, but he did receive notice of this. And we've been in very regular conversation with Mr. Alba and the district regarding this matter for quite a while.
It's me. Angie Sanders, General Counsel for the board. The only other point I want to make is that there is a notice requirement in the law, in the rule, but it's just that we have to send that notice 30 days prior. So the receipt, when he received it, is not a requirement. The 30 days is the date that we send it, and it was sent 30 days before the date of this meeting.
The letter says that, or the letter specifically says that the board proposes to automatically and permanently revoke. And you have the ability to. It's not saying that you don't have to do it, but what we're asking for is continuance so that he can actually get his due process rights.
But do you acknowledge, sir, that the revocation is automatic without a hearing? You acknowledge that that's what the law says?
The law says, yes, it is based upon a finding from DCS, an organization who's continuously allowing children to be killed while in their state's custody. These are the people who promulgate these rules. They promulgate the rules.
There's a lot of stuff that's being said, to include dates and letters and a lot of other things. My simple understanding of the facts is your client admitted to committing a misdemeanor assault. DCS is very concerned about that. The law says that if the matter is substantiated by DCS, that his license shall be revoked, and further, that he shall not be on school grounds. So why are we spending state resources hearing this matter?
Due process requires notice and opportunity to be heard. He got notice, but he has not had the opportunity to be heard at this point on the situation.
I understand.
They did the DCS investigation. I'm obviously not a DCS proponent, but they send out the letter. It also requires that the DCS letter said that he has they have indicated him as a perpetrator. Well, nobody even contacted him prior to this investigation or this finding or this hearing. Where's the due process? Miller, I think you made your point.
I'd like to make a motion that we, I guess the matter's automatic, so there's not really a hearing, or we're not approving necessarily. Well, then we'll ask legal counsel, what is the motion that would be made to move past this issue?
I believe it would be a motion to accept the recommendation.
I make a motion to accept the recommendation.
I have discussion afterwards.
I'm fine.
You're done, okay. We have a motion to accept the recommendation. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Will seconds. Is there further discussion? No further discussion. It requires a roll call vote.
Yes.
Ms. Griffin, please call the roll.
Mr. Collins. Aye. Ms. Hargrove.
Aye.
Mr. Holt.
Aye.
Mr. Jensen.
Aye.
Ms. McIntyre.
Aye.
Mr. Mullenhour.
Aye.
Mr. Morrow.
Aye.
Mr. Wells.
Aye.
Chairman Eby.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, you have 9 ayes.
Thank you. I'd like to thank you all for taking the opportunity to speak on this. Thank you very much. Next item is teacher license discipline actions. There was a chance that was going to be here.
I don't believe he's here. If he did come out in the hallway. He's on board at this time, Mr. North. Go ahead and do these collectively. So next up, we do have the recommendations for denial of formal reprimand, suspension, or revocation. While these actions are not automatic, board rule provides that action is warranted. Board's legal staff recommends approval, and we're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions for Madison or legal staff? Take these up in total then, A through J. Is there a motion to accept the recommendation? We'll all move. Second. Vice Chair Cobbins, seconds. I think requires a roll call vote. Ms. Griffin.
Mr. Collins. Aye. Ms. Hargrove. Aye. Mr. Holt.
Aye.
Mr. Jensen.
Aye.
Ms. McIntyre.
Aye.
Mr. Mullenhour.
Aye.
Mr. Morrow.
Aye.
Mr. Wells.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, you have 9 ayes.
Motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Hanson. This item is other business. Is there any other business? I would just like to thank each one of the board members here. We've had 2 full days. These 2 very good days. Lots of good discussion. Excellent work. And going with the board takes on some quality work, quality decisions. No other objection, I will adjourn.